Hello all, and welcome to the 46th Climate and Ecology Workshop. Or something tell me this is the 46th. I'm going to try to get in touch with all the pertinent people. Unfortunately, the way things are gone here, the usual beef, X isn't very, very friendly. And because of that, it's always more difficult to get in touch with everyone, sadly. I know I've got so anyway, there are we're all going to start this soon, and I start this a little bit early so I can get everything together. And oh my God, I've got a problem here. There is so much garbage on my feed right now. There are literally idiots who are asking me questions, and I can't answer them in time. I just have to ignore all of their nonsense and continue with the space. Uh, Hey Neil, you're not here very often. How you doing? I'm trying to get everybody together. As I've mentioned, well, there is a problem whenever you do these spaces. Today, when you start a space, they give you a list of people who you can, if you want, invite. And there's about 30 to 50 people that have been here once or twice, or sometimes, every single time. And those people are not on the list. It is literally an alphabetical order. It's the Wheel of Fortune. X spins the wheel, and where it decides to land is who it's going to let you choose out of those 50, unless you manually select. And then I'm forced to try to manually select. And a lot of people, unfortunately, aren't there. So I'm going to have to try to bring everybody together based on the who I can get to quick in the quickest way possible. I think one of the easiest ways of doing it is to actually find this link and then broadcast it. So let me do that. I'm usually more prepared than for this. Today, I've been doing so much secondary work that I haven't been able to. And oh yeah, so I've got to do this now with the smartphone, instead of just doing it the way I would prefer to do it. But it's just like I said, more bitch moaning and complaining. I am going to engage the auxiliary as the emergency backup, which again has to be done every single time. So you can ensure that should the space accidentally crash, which it does every single week, there is a little bit of backup. And here it is. So I'm going to start the listening process. And I need to turn my microphone off on that so that I don't have feedback. And I have to ask it to be a co-host. Anyway, I'm just, I'm vamping here. We're going to spend a lot of time today talking about the recent issue with the California wildfires. And I'm not going to call it the Los Angeles wildfires, because some of those are in Los Angeles proper. Some of those are in Los Angeles County and other cities in Los Angeles, in Los Angeles County, not Los Angeles, the city. There's a lot to discuss on this topic, mostly why the deniers are claiming these are all arson fires when they are not arson fires, why they think that literally no fire ever existed in the history of mankind, save for those that were arsons. So obviously, for the last 300 million years, which is roughly when fires occurred on planet Earth, they must have all been arson. Obviously, because there couldn't have been any man-made fires in those 300 million years. Why do we say there's only been fire on Earth for 300 million years? And it's tricky. That's because before Mother Nature decided to invent wood, there was nothing that could easily burn. So You would have a fire and it would relatively put itself out quickly, even though there had been times in Earth's history where the atmospheric percentage of concentration was as high as roughly 29%. At 29% O2, literally the tiniest spark will cause everything to catch fire, specifically materials that can catch fire. Before lignite-based wood, it wasn't that easy to have fires start. Come on, where can I? I hate this. I, they really make it so difficult to host a space if you're trying to do it on a Android device, even when you're using the. Okay, Kim, I do see you are now enabled as a speaker host. How you doing, Kim?
I'm pretty good, Sal. Thank you for asking. How are you today?
I did my 5 miler early in the day. It wasn't the most fun I've ever had because I brought my hand warmers with me just in case. And as I always do, I dry run things. So I turned on both of them and I attempted to turn on both of them and they failed to turn on. And I'm like, what the? So apparently, even though I charged them a couple of weeks ago, in the last, in those whatever 2 or 3 weeks since the last time I charged them, they self-discharged. So I didn't have, I didn't need the hand warmers. It was 24 Fahrenheit, which is about -5 degrees Celsius.
Oh,
Uh, but
that's that's what it is here.
there was almost no wind,
That's
and
nice.
even though it was cold, and I wasn't even wearing my heavy jacket. It was, and I wasn't wearing my flannel jeans. I did a last minute. All right, what am I going to do?
Were you wearing
And I
long
said,
johns?
no.
No, I haven't put
Uh,
mine on yet this year either.
I did once, and we did a trip upstate, so I once wore them.
But
Last
flannel jeans,
year,
those sound comfy. I don't have any of those.
uh, these are not the ones that I'm wearing. 'Cause they're from Eddie Bauer.
Okay.
Eddie Bauer has, depending on the time of year, they have unbelievable sales. So these were $100 on sale for then half price. So it ended up costing me 30 jeans. So you get it the
Well,
right
that's
time.
yeah, exactly. I find after Christmas and early January, a great time to buy things, including like at the food stores, like gourmet stuff I wouldn't normally buy. They're like half price right now. Like I go into Whole Foods and I'm getting locally roasted coffee for half the price it would be. So I'm just like, oh, I it's my favorite time to shop. I think it's in January. Um, Here we've got some hope. I think it's part of a broader climate hope. I like to say is that at one of the local parks every year the community gets together to build a skating rink. And last year, I think it lasted for probably about 5 days. This year, I see they've got ice in there just a few days ago as I walked by, and the temperatures have remained around zero and a little bit below zero, even during the daytime. So I'm hopeful that the skating rink will survive and we won't have any big warming spells.
Uh, I think from what I've seen, I assume that you're in exactly the same situation as we are here. There's going to be a significant cold front blowing through. It's going to be some of the coldest temperatures that we've had in the last 5 years. And it's to be expected.
Do you think that's a part of the polar vortex coming down a bit?
Yes.
Have they? It is okay. That might be something interesting to discuss. I was just reading an
Um,
article about it.
yeah, I think you know what? Maybe next week we'll deal with that, especially as it affects uh, North American climate.
Right. Well, I think, did your area get a lot of snow? Was it last week or earlier this week?
So far this year, if you combine it all, I think we've had about 5 centimeters. So, so it's not
Not much.
exactly a huge amount of snow. Uh, Now that we have several people here, I'm just gonna do universal invites to speak. I hope I just did everybody. It is a problem, obviously, as I've mentioned, that trying to administer these spaces with a an Android device is, and it's they write the software. This I'm not using a third party software to run this. This is the Twitter app. Sorry, X app. When I put it on this computer, this phone was called Twitter. The Twitter
I
app
call it Twitter.
on Android, and it sucks.
Well, but let's be honest. It's also not easy to do when you've got three cats on your lap, right?
Today, actually, I had an extremely unusual event until about 2 minutes before I started this. I had our Siamese cat, who we've had for 6 years. He wasn't sitting on my lap. I don't think he's ever been on my lap. He was sitting right next to me, and then he got spooked and left.
Was it something you said or no?
Oh, I can't sneeze around him. If I sneeze, he's in the neighbor's house, or and anything sets him off. He is the most frightened of everything cat I've ever seen. He is also gloriously beautiful, very good natured, very sweet. But I'll tell you, if I put out food for 4 cats, I can't put out food for five yet. I put out food for 4 cats, and if there's nobody else in the room, he will eat. And the
Right. That's
minute
very
one cat
shy.
comes in, the minute one other cat comes into the room, he's like, "Oh, please take my food," and he runs away from it. And again, he waits until everybody else has left the room, then he'll come back to eat.
So, because of that, is he a bit on the skinny side?
Oh no, he's relatively porky for a Siamese.
Okay.
I never see him eating it. He's huge.
When
He's
everybody's
not that big.
sleeping, maybe.
He's not that big. But yeah, they all have that issue. All of my cats are a little bit on the big side. Uh, and the new kid, he accidentally broke out this morning, so I had to chase him through the entire house. Uh, we want to do this. We want to give him free run. But if you guys, you guys follow my account, you've seen the photographs. Uh, we we have picked up cats
He
before
is
from
gorgeous.
secondhand Siamese. They're really great guys in they say Connecticut, but it's like they're on the Connecticut New York border. So we picked up Ming, our other Siamese. We picked him up six. Hello, Ming. You want to come here, Mingy? We picked him up 6 years ago. So we got the new guy, and they have lousy photographs of him. And I looked at the photographs, and I'm like, that's a nice cat, and he's his life sounds like he'd be a great cat. And he was in a box, and then John transferred Blue from his box to our box, and I never got to really see the cat. And anyway, I take him home, and I open up the box, and he jumps out of the box, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, this thing is unbelievable! He's the most beautiful cat I've ever seen in my life. He is gorgeous. Apparently, and here's his backstory. He was bought for breeding purposes. So he is a parent of at least we know of 6 kittens. And the owner, I guess they had a problem selling these Blue Point Siamese. And then they decided that's it. We can't sell the Siamese. We're going to do Maine Coon cats instead. So they just, it's a business. They didn't care about this cat. He probably cost them, I'm guessing, between $2,000 and $5,000. And it's just like, forget it. Just ship him off somewhere. Surrender him to a no-kill shelter, and so be it. And so that's how we got him.
So, like I said, they probably spent 3 arms and a leg on this cat. But this the whole thing is money. They want don't get a bred cat or a bred dog. Go to a shelter. Go to people who you know, or people who you trust. This is just such a horrible system. All of these animals are not treated well. I guess this is the part of the program where we talk about ecology. Uh, they take these poor dogs and these cats, and because he is an unfixed male cat, they probably had him in a large crate all of the time. Maybe he might have been out for a few hours a day, and he didn't have that much human attention, and he didn't have that much cat attention. It literally, except for when he had to do his job, and so they don't have as much interaction. Luckily, he is just very, very good natured and very, very sweet, and he's adapting to people very, very quickly. But he doesn't know how to talk to cats. So he walks into the room and he's thinking, well, I can just say hello to these guys and they're all going to love me immediately. And they're all like, yo, dude, back off. You're too aggressive. So it's like with people, sometimes a person walks into a room and they just don't know how to read the room properly and they think that everybody's going to fall in love with them and it doesn't work.
Well, can I ask,
Uh,
with Sal, with him not being fixed, are the
oh,
other
he is fixed
cats
now.
fixed?
He
Oh,
is
now he
fixed.
is
He is
fixed.
fixed
Okay,
now.
okay,
Yes.
okay.
There, there is no rescue shelter that is going to, unless it's such a young kitten that the kitten is too young to be fixed. They will not give anybody a cat that hasn't been spayed slash neutered. They also want to make sure that they all have the proper rabies shots, the proper feline FLV, which is essentially like AIDS, but for cats, and distemper and all of the other cat illnesses. And they also deworm because that goes without saying. Any cat or any dog, pretty much, that's either from a shelter or a feral. Well, you're not going to rescue many feral dogs, abandoned dogs. They all have worms. It's just literally, you walk on Earth, you're picking up the worms from ringworms, heartworms, and other assorted baddies. But I think we've had it. I want to leave the cats behind, although I may go upstairs later on. Let me see what I'm doing in terms of my internet. I'm gonna change. Oh no, don't do it. I would. I've already had two situations on this space where I had interruptions, where I went from where my Bluetooth turned off and then turned back on. I wasn't completely kicked yet, but I can see that this is going to be more problematic than the usual day. And you guys who follow me, you see the stuff that I'm doing. Uh, there is so much disinformation out there on the California wildfires, as we always have disinformation on climate change. This is a we are fighting a two front war. One is to try to teach people about the risks and dangers and the data of climate. And the other front in this war is battling the intentional disinformation that people are more than happy to give out. And it's just hard to understand why someone would lie about any ecological topic. It is mostly, well, there's two things. One is they do it for the money, and the other is there is a disease in our society where if your political bend is toward uh, hating government, then you will hate everything that government puts out, even when it's just weather service news, or more recently, now it's health news. So, oh, but the minute your candidate goes into office, then you change 100%, and now you're completely in favor of any and all authoritarian means that your government uses to go after the other side. So now all the people who were like, oh, we are so happy that Trump never started a war, they're like, so where can we send the troops now? Robert, good morning. Robert, if you please, you feel free to join in on the conversation. If you have the bandwidth and, and the internet will let you, and everything else works normally. I know Robert always has problems coming online. Oh, John is here. I'm sorry, I missed you. Hello, John. I'll continue on until Robert is ready to speak. But
I'm
Robert,
sorry,
anytime you
Sal.
want.
Yeah, Sal, I do apologize. What it was then, I didn't switch my microphone off. So if everyone wants to, my microphone on, I mean, so if everyone wants to laugh now at this dimwit, please feel free to have a laugh at me there because I just realized I was talking away and had my microphone off. I thought, come on, man, be
We've
sensible. Yeah.
we've all
Anyway,
done that, Robert.
I
Hello,
know.
how are you?
I'm not too bad, thanks, Kim. I hope equally you're okay over there across the pond. Of course, you're in Canada, aren't you, Kim? Is that right? Am I right in saying that? Yeah,
That's right. Yeah, we were just discussing the
yeah,
weather a bit earlier.
yeah.
All's good here. We've got snow. We've got a skating rink. Oh, excuse me.
Well, I think someone's upstaged you and me there, Kim, actually, just slightly. Anyway, well, I've got a connection, folks. I shall do my best to make myself constructive within this space. I hope that sounds realistic. Everyone laugh at once, please. Right, I want to actually touch as briefly as I can, or maybe not so briefly, on disinformation, because if there's nothing that makes my blood boil more, it is this sickness of mentality that seems to not just be blanketing the American mindsets and American political mindsets, but so many mindsets across the planet, be it in any given country, not least in my own country, the United Kingdom, from the political disease of actually denying climate collapse.
And as expected.
He might come back. Let's. It sometimes it's like a wave that goes in and out.
Especially when it comes to spaces. So bear with me, won't you? And if it's still all right to speak, my friend, I'll carry on.
Sure, please do.
I'm so sorry. So I don't know my connection problems on spaces. You know, don't you? You know how difficult they are for some reason or another. I think it's all down to signal and internet, maybe. Some people have said to me my location and everything. But anyway, continuing about this diseased mindset, as I can only call it that just makes me absolutely goddamn livid. The level of collapse that we are in. And I know, Sal, that you see this daily on posts from idiotic nitwits and idiots who who talk in this ridiculous denying language, thinking that they're actually being of some clever mentality and putting this denial, because we all know that there are unlimited ways of describing your level of stupidity and denial. And my God, every single time I think that I've seen every single sort of climate denier that I possibly could do in the form of my work on X, I still get surprised at the levels of depravity that people will sink to in order to endanger not just their own lives and their kids and their families, but their work colleagues and everyone else around them needlessly, just for the sake of, pardon my language here, kissing the arses of the oil industry and of conglomerates and of political power that's already diseased enough to be able to continue push the manipulation of disinformation.
And I have to fight the urge to deal with the deniers while I'm doing this. Uh, so let's continue with today's narrative. Oh,
Oh, do you want to speak first? I'll leave it up to you.
I,
I'm here again.
I'll fill in some details and then we'll weave a tapestry here.
All right. Yeah,
Uh,
I'm okay to continue talking to myself, just so as I know. That's okay. All right. Anyway, I will continue trying to get out what I say. But remember, folks, if I get cut off again, it's my signal. I'm sure you all know. So anyway, talking about this level of denial and manipulation of people's minds, it's something that I still cannot fathom why people would want to purposely endanger their own families at the expense of lying about something that is happening all around them. I mean, it is absolutely blatantly obvious the levels of collapse that we are seeing in terms of the heating and warming of our planet. We have scientific data coming out of our ears showing us, but it's not just the data. It's actually a case of using your goddamned eyes and seeing what's playing out across our planet. This is what I would say and continue to say to all idiots that continue to push me and tell me that there's no climate crisis. There's nothing guaranteed to push my buttons and make me more angry than some idiot coming to me and telling me, hey, it's all right, Rob, there's no climate crisis. And then, of course, you saw that you feel that vicious pang of explaining exactly the realities of a situation. You scream at them and you say, for God's sake, don't be such an idiot. Don't be such a moron. Wake up and see the realities. Understand the data. Read the climate data. Read the scientific data. Understand what's going on around you and open your goddamned eyes to the situation. I'm afraid to say that the levels of denial are shocking across our society. There's no other two ways of saying it. The levels of inability of people's mindsets to still not grasp a crisis that is claiming communities by the second. We have community by community now disappearing underwater. There is not a single day that goes by that we don't have major disasters across our planet playing out at any given spot that are claiming the lives of people, that are claiming communities, that are
yes, we have. I think we have 25 dead confirmed in the Los Angeles County fires. We should note that the Los Angeles fires are partly in Los Angeles, the city, and the other parts of Los Angeles, the county. I think Los Angeles County is the largest physical county in the United States, or one of the largest physical counties. So the city itself is pretty large, but
It's
the
the
county is much larger.
population.
You're back.
you give me the thumbs up when I can carry on. Right. Okay. Yeah.
You continue. You can continue. I'm just going to fill in the gaps when you have
Yeah.
communications issues.
All right, Sal. Anyway, right. Do you want to speak, Sal, or am I all right to continue?
Please continue.
All right, thanks, Sal. Anyway, as I was saying about this level of collapse that we're seeing playing out across our planet, we all of us know here that we've already banished the 1.5 C threshold. We know we're at 1.6 C. We know that the coming years are now absolutely catastrophic for the levels of warming that are going to continue to engulf entire communities in X given countries. We know that left unchecked the way that things are, with the blatant denial that is still existing within our political societies, our political governments across our planet, if we continue on the course that we are continuing on, we are already looking at mass wipeout within the next 10 to 15, 20 years, absolutely guaranteed. We already have mass extinction wipeout, the like of which the public have never seen before. But what we are seeing now are the goalposts moving categorically for how much collapse is now taking place. Put it like this: I mean, I don't really need to reiterate this because we're all clued up, intelligent individuals within this space. But I'm just speaking generally now at the levels of mental inability to be able to understand the collapse that we're now in. Let me put it like this. I don't need to say to anyone here, but I do have to reiterate this point. When you see some of the world's most gifted and brainy climate scientists openly admitting day in, day out that they are terrified and scared at the levels of collapse that are now engulfing our planet at a rate that even they hadn't expected, and yet we have a public that is comatose, that is sleepwalking into unimaginable tragedies and disasters by the day, simply because they are not mentally wired up to understand what emergencies are. They still don't understand what disasters are, because the problem is we have vast swathes of our society that are so desensitized, so locked in misinformation and disinformation, that you can firmly put square and pegged this mass level of disinformation and misinformation that is being pushed on social media platforms every single day, that continually has. Sorry, Sal, were you going to say something? And I wasn't sure if you're going to say.
No, no, I wasn't. If you, so please go on.
Okay, Sal. Thank
I
you.
Robert, I wanted to
Yeah,
to say something.
yeah, please, Kim. Thank you.
Well, there's two things here that you bring to mind in what you're talking about. One is the fact that I've noticed that some people that I would label climate deniers
Yeah,
on Twitter, when you call them that, they get very offended by that.
they should do.
They don't consider themselves climate
Oh
deniers.
no.
They consider themselves
Yeah.
being very logical,
Oh yeah.
rational, non-emotional. So there's that
Yeah.
aspect of it,
So
and
they
as you
can.
were saying, that often, it's this notion of being hardwired,
Yeah,
and I think
absolutely.
that is central to like the human belief system, and how once you start believing something, it's very hard to let go of those beliefs because that becomes a part of your identity. And
Absolutely.
the other thing I wanted to touch on was the fact that Facebook recently rolled back the fact checking programs that it has. And I think this could be possibly in response to the change of government in the United States. What do you think about that? No, no, no. Oh, you can't.
So
You no. I was just asking, what do you think about the fact that Facebook is now rolling back its fact checking program, which will potentially allow much more
mm,
disinformation and misinformation to be spread on that platform?
I tell you, I'll answer directly to you, Kim, because you can always trust me, as you probably know from knowing me, that I will give accurate, truthful, concise, and straight answers on any given topic to do with this. And I will say that my opinion is that it's disastrous for truth. It's disastrous for speaking. For pushing integrity, decency, the facts for what they are in their entirety. We have enough misinformation and disinformation across all platforms to last several lifetimes. We don't need any more. We are absolutely inundated by a collapse of mental clarity, a collapse of mental responsibility, a collapse of being able to understand decency, a collapse of being able to understand the truth on all platforms. We are having the very fabric of truth itself eroded to such extent on platforms. And of course, I'm speaking objectively here, Kim, on that very platform that you were just asking me that question on. It's a disgrace. It really is as simple as that, and it will open even wider the caverns for more disinformation, more dishonesty, and more misinformation to extents of which, obviously, I can't categorically say exactly how much damage it will do, but the damage will be massive. We can be assured on that. But what we must continue to do, and I know I don't need to speak for anyone here because I said we're all clued up in this space. We're all intelligent individuals. We understand the levels of what's going on with information and
Julian, hello, good morning, and whatever you got to say.
Hello, buenos dias, Sal. Good morning, all. Um, I was just thinking that we started out with cats, and I love cats.
Julian, I can see you've got your hand up, and I don't want to keep you from speaking, my friend. So I will be as brief as I can. Anyway, to wrap up, I think maybe safely to let Julian speak in a minute. I will just say this, I hope that answers the question as thoroughly as I can for you, Kim. But as I've said, it will be totally disastrous to the way that this continual disease of being able to lie subjectively as much as your little heart desires without reaping any consequences is going to be catastrophic still for levels of being able to speak the truth. But it's not over, not by any extent, because I've said this before many times, as I'm sure many of you know, on my work on X, and I will continue to say it. And I will say it again now in this space, that we must continue to push night and day, 24/7, all those that want to distort the truth about the climate crisis. We must continue to push categorically those levels of misinformation and disinformation into the gutter, into the dust, or where they rightly belong. Because while we still have people that openly deny climate collapse, climate emergency, and all the other subjectives of which we know it to be called, we have an open cavern for denial that is like an infected wound in a way. It's a wound that is continued to be able to fester and grow, because that's what denial of a sixth mass extinction is. It's a festering wound for people who will deny it. That's what it categorically is, and we must not allow that level of complacency, of distortion of the truth, distortion of being able to push the facts in their entirety. We cannot allow those facts to be distorted to such an extent that lies take over completely. It is absolutely essential that we continue to push back all misinformation and all disinformation. And I know everyone here knows that I'll do everything in my power with the work I do on X on a daily basis, continue to push those levels of distortion away. Because I will say this, just on my closing words. I'm sorry if I held you up, Julian, by the way. I can see your hands cut. So I shall try to be brief. And I just want to say hello to you, Oliver, because I've just seen you joined us, and I hope you're okay. Anyway, as I was going to say, talking about this subjectively a second, the inauguration of a white fascist president is almost upon us. The level of denial within that man's mind is more than appalling. It's more than a disgrace. It's more than a disgrace to the entire planet. It's actually a crime against 8+ billion people. The level of denial within Trump's mind is a deliberate crime against the safeguarding of our planet to the people, and it should be seen as such. I will say this, that if the workings of our
uh, Julian, please, until he returns.
Okay.
lunatic over his next 4 years of his oppressive regime over the planet, if I can put it like that. Because this guy thinks, obviously, that anything becomes him. He thinks that he can distort the truth with impunity. I've said before that if Trump thinks categorically that every single person and every single decent organization on the planet, if he thinks for 1 second that he can still continue to get away with manipulating every single person on the planet, he's got another thing coming, because he will never achieve it. But I will say this, the people that he has already infected the mindsets of We have a large group of very dangerous individuals that are going to cause massive peril for our environment and for the climate, but we must continue to be vigilant in our ability to be able to push back the lies, push back the propaganda, push back everything that this guy within the presidency throws at us. Because if we don't remain vigilant on it, we can expect to have to suffer in unimaginable ways. There is going to be catastrophic damage as it is. We already know that. Everyone here knows that. The levels of degradation to our environmental systems under this coming Trump presidency are going to be absolutely massive. The levels of climate collapse increase are going to be absolutely massive. There are going to be significant numbers of people that are going to suffer and die as a result of this presidency. There is no question about that. But I will say this anyway, closing while I've still got a signal, that if we continue to fight and be vigilant in all the ways that we possibly can do, and probably a lot of ways that we haven't yet figured out, we must continue to push and push and push the levels of clarity, the levels of facts on the climate crisis, and the levels of understanding to as many people, and to empower and educate as many people, not just in America, but collectively across our planet, and continue to, as we possibly can do. Because it's that blanket cover of education within not just but within governments, within policies, within systems, within environments, with
We'll
I
give it.
think one of these days we're going to have to do a whip rounds to get him a better router.
I think it'll stay the same.
Julian, it's been ages you've been trying to speak.
All right.
Please.
All right then. I'll get back to it. Where was I with the cat? And it actually is relevant. That cats are amazing. I've always loved cats. I don't currently have a cat, but I've had lots of cats, and I'm sure I'll have another cat. Um, Cats are really zen creatures. Thank you.
carry on, Julian. I've finished near enough now.
Thank you. I will actually, and there's a lot of things that Robert said that I want to get to via the cats, but I'm going to get back to the cats. And I mean, a lot of people, a lot more clever than me, have noticed that cats are enlightened beings. They absolutely live in the present moment. They don't regret the past. They don't worry about the future. They have a kind human to take care of all their needs, whom they own. There is your cat. And yes, there is a lot of disinformation. There is a lot of climate denialism on X. And it's a really good question how best to address it. Not too long ago, I was on one of the last spaces on X where Michael Mann spoke. And there was something very interesting there to me, which was that rather than speak about climate, he spoke mostly about strategies to address trolling and disinformation on X. And this actually made a lot of sense to me because, first of all, if he'd spoken about climate, he would have been preaching to the choir. Everybody in that room essentially would have agreed with him. There's no point in that. But the reason why I want to get to the cats and the Zen and the Buddhism, um, I love following Sal's discussions with climate deniers here on X. Not only do I learn a lot, they're brilliant, and he's always right. I mean, it really is hilarious to watch. Uh, is this really a good use of our energy? Is a question here. I think in some cases, yes, in some cases, no. Once again, I think Sal is pretty good at blocking the trolls, the obvious trolls. Then you have intermediate people who have some dithering notions of science. The problem for me, I personally enjoy sometimes arguing with people here on X, and I try to not let that be an ego thing. Not just do it because I will be satisfied to prove my point. I mean, that's nice, that's all very well and good and great, but in terms of what really concerns us, which is the future of our planet, me being right on one particular issue at one particular moment in time isn't going to get us very far. However, as a collective, uh, countering disinformation is important. It really is. Robert is quite right. I've noticed that there's a lot of concern within the U.S. about of course there is about Trump incoming. Of course, there's a lot of concern. But really, Trump's administration is going to be an administration for the world, especially as regards the environment. Uh, the world, I mean, a country like Mexico is gazing on in terror, and I presume Canada much the same, and the same goes for Brazil. Uh, you know, things like Trump possibly dismantling the NOAA, stuff like this would be truly a critical threat for the planet as a whole. So we can't underestimate the gravity of the problem. That's absolutely true. Um, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Let me pick up from there because you just gave me a perfect introduction to a completely different topic. First of all, yes, NOAA is one of the most important resources that we have on climate data. But over the last few years, competition has taken place. And we now have the European Union with their Copernicus service, which is almost as good as NOAA. We have the Japanese Meteorological Agency. And again, they're not there precisely, but they're almost as good. And when it comes to climate and weather forecasting, I hate to say this, or maybe I shouldn't say hate to say this, but European climate models for the next, let's say, 50 days of what could happen in terms of global weather are better than North American. So, in some respects, uh, should NOAA literally dissolve overnight, it will be horrific. But because the United States has not been leading in climate research for the last 20 years, it's given space for other competitors to do an excellent job. NOAA hasn't launched a weather satellite other than GOES West for quite a long time. So our bye bye, leaving the room. We lost some of the redundancy that we had in terms of climate forecasting. The United States has had poor priorities. We have launched some very, very good satellites on looking at emissions, but so have the European Space Agency. So it's more in terms of we've been collaborating with other agencies on climate research lately rather than being the tip of the spear. So yes, it will be disastrous if NOAA is dismantled and we lose a lot of that data bandwidth. But luckily, other people are taking over. So that's it.
Thanks. Yeah, and that relieves me.
And without putting too fine a point on it, whenever we're going to see it in a couple of weeks, actually, I should say a couple of months. But when hurricane season for 2025 begins, and this is going to be an interesting one because even though we oh wow, forget about that. I'm going to completely change what I was about to say. We will probably be back in a El Nino when 2025's hurricane season begins. But it's going to be a very, very mild El Nino, or it's going to be neutral. So we're going to go from our current mild La Nina to back to neutral or even El Nino during hurricane season. Mild La Ninas and La Ninas in general can sometimes have weird hurricane seasons. Even though there's less energy in the Pacific, that reduces the crosswinds that cuts hurricanes off. So you can get more hurricane formation and stronger hurricanes in a La Nina year, but only in the Atlantic, not in the Pacific.
Yeah, just thinking about LA right now, because I used to live there. Um, yes, I'm really worried about what you might term concomitant climate disasters, one after the other. First, the fires, and now that the hillsides have been denuded of vegetation, rain that comes could be really, really dangerous. Mexico saw this with hurricanes Otis and then John. First, Otis completely denuded the vegetation from the surrounded hillsides, and then John came in and devastated the rest. And so Acapulco is ever since in a state of permanent disaster that the government can't fix. But yeah, I'm pretty worried about LA, certainly.
Uh,
And we're talking about building codes and lots of interesting things that you can get back to. So
you started. You know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. But tell everybody else what's the next step.
in terms of what?
Mudslides.
Mudslide, what can we do to prevent them?
Well, that's what you were leading up to the next step once
Oh,
you've denuded the mountain, but you
we
didn't
need to
finish. you
replant.
didn't finish.
Replant. Let's regrow.
There's there's actually a new term for it. I believe that Daniel Swain, or I think it's Swain, came up with, which is where is it? Hydroclimate, or I wrote it down. Hydroclimatic whiplash. Rapid swings between intensely wet and dangerously dry weather, and that, you know, you have the very dry weather, you have the fires, you have the drought, you have increased aridity, and then you get the atmospheric rivers, you get the rain bombs. There's no vegetation to absorb the rain that comes down, and you get the flooding and the mudslides. That's increasing all over the world, according to Daniel Swain. Oh, Swain. I'm not sure. How do you pronounce his name?
This is Neil. I think the case in Southern California at this time is more that the atmospheric rivers actually added to the amount of fuel that was available to burn rather than the hills being denuded, and that the landslide erosion part of it will be, is to be determined depending on how the weather comes in the future. But right now, it's was extra vegetation that was the result of this drought,
Oh no,
atmospheric
Yeah,
river cycle.
that's
yeah.
why he's mentioning the next phase, which typically happens after a fire, is then you when water happens, then you get the mudslide.
Exactly. Hopefully not, but it could happen. It really depends on how, just the rainfall could be light initially. It could regenerate the chaparral nicely. That potential is there. There's also a good chance that an atmospheric river will come through and you'll have a disastrous erosion and mudslide situation. But We don't know yet.
Well, I was
But
reading.
right now, it's extra vegetation is what's been happening in this particular case.
Yes, Neil, I was reading about that. That was they were had a bit higher average rains. I think in 2023, and that led to the growth of more ground cover of shrubbery, which I guess is fuel for this fire that's going on. I am interested in the chaparral shrubs or plants, and I don't know enough about it. I just started reading about it because apparently they are the type of shrubs that they've had in Southern California for a very long time. But I think according to like natural fire cycle, without being influenced by climate change, they would have fires such as no, not such as these, but they would have fires like once every 50 years or once every 100 years. So I'm interested in seeing what exactly they're thinking of doing with these chaparral bushes, and if it really has that big an impact on it, because it seems like it more has to do with the Santa Ana winds and having so many people and so many structures in between the lower lying areas, and the winds funneling through like the canyons and everything like that, which I mean, I just can't imagine. But some of the firefighters were saying, the winds whip down towards the ocean. And then he said he's never seen it before, but then they turned around and whipped right back up again.
It's true that most of the burned area is chaparral, and it is, quote unquote, fire adapted, a fire adapted biome. And so fire is normal there. It remains to be seen you know, how this will play out in the future, because I think the fear of mudslides is real. The atmospheric rivers, my understanding is that recent weather patterns in the last couple of years were very unusual. I grew up in LA and lived in California for 50 years, and I don't recall this ever happening in LA. And so I haven't looked at the weather records, but I think we're kind of in new territory. So it remains to be seen how this will play out. I just found out, interestingly and germanely, that a buddy of mine who lives in Altadena lost his house. He's a pretty famous bass player, and I'd been thinking for years. He lived right up next to the San Bernardino Mountains, and every time there was a fire there, I was thinking, oh my God, my friend is at risk, and he finally got hit, and he lost everything. He was a famous bass player. He lost his instruments,
I
and
I heard there was a recording studio that had literally thousands of hundreds of thousands of hours of masters are now gone.
well, it may be he didn't have this. Well, in this particular case, he didn't. I'd been in his studio quite a while ago, and it wasn't really. I mean, he had scores, he had fine basses, I'm pretty sure he had
Well,
Ray Brown, famous bass player. He inherited Ray Brown's bass, and all of that was lost. So just in vintage fine instruments, he probably lost a couple $100,000. And his name is John Clayton, by the way. He's fairly well known. He plays with Diana Krall, and he's recently played with Paul McCartney. And um, he wrote the arrangement for Whitney Houston's Star Spangled Banner. So he's big guy, but I know him from high school. But yeah, I'm wondering if it's possible Well, one thing I was thinking about while you guys were talking about, does it do any good to engage deniers on X? And I follow Sal off and on and see how he interacts with deniers. And I have been, engaging people around the disinformation about the fires, and it's just mind-boggling what people write and the disinformation people cling to. And the one thing I think of that, I don't know if this is helpful, but it just seems like it's these beliefs, they're quasi religious beliefs, is kind of how about it. It's almost how they define their culture, and their tribe is a series of beliefs, and they're not, it's not rational. And that's the thing that I think I've said this in the past to Sal over X, but it just feels to me like they just don't think the way we do. They are not dealing with data and facts. They're not. If you give them, three things to think about, they're going to go back to the thing they started with. Like, for example, with the LA fire, it's been this Santa Ynez reservoir that was empty, and you can't well that there is no problem with water that's needed to fight the fires, and that it was, a transient situation with fire hydrants in Pacific Palisades due to the design of the fire hydrant system there, and it has nothing to do with Santa Ynez Reservoir. None of this information. So anyway, given that, I'm just kind of at a loss for, I mean, I guess the thing I think about is that if I engage somebody and I try to be factual and to provide good information about a topic like this, I hope somebody is paying attention. I hope somebody sees the good information, that they can contrast that with the disinformation. But beyond that, I mean, I just wonder, it just feels like you're beating your head against the wall much of the time.
Let me, let me put it this way. I think from everything that I've seen in years of doing this, you have the potential to change one mind in 100. But the audience is a lot more than, is not more than just a few people. And what I'm trying to do, what other people are trying to do, is we're essentially training the audience on how to think. So I'm showing people how you can break down where they're making their mistakes and where you can find legitimate sources of information. Because no, these trolls are just, they are literally the worst people imaginable. And you cannot change their minds. Or at least I should, again, 1 out of 100. And I've actually had very good relationships with those 1 out of 100 who suddenly they discover, oh, I've been lied to my whole life by right-wing media.
Yeah.
But it almost never happens. Like I said, I can name it on, on one or two hands the people.
Yeah. I live in Indiana, so I'm just seeing a lot of, kind of backward religious, kind of white nationalistic sentiments. We have a very, oh God, he's just an awful Attorney General, Todd Rokita, who just had the governor sign a executive order. Newly elected governor Mike Braun signed an executive order banning DEI statewide, and so on. And the thing, and you guys are probably familiar that this is in the United States a kind of a center of white Protestant culture. And as somebody from I'm a Californian who's stuck here, and I lived in Berkeley in LA. It's just striking to me, it's like these people are just falling into a world of disinformation that is reminiscent of the mid 20s or leading up to World War II, and where there's just a mass hysteria and blindness about a whole range of issues. But I really, we're up against a lot, I guess, is where I'm going with this. And it again, I would just say that I just kind of bundle these trolls and the MAGA and so on into a tribal, quasi-religious set of feelings, and it's almost like they're more characterized by the things that they believe that are objectively false than they are by things that people like us know are scientifically and factually accurate and true. And
I'm about to. Oh, I'm going to break you for 1 second to have fun.
go ahead.
I'm about to post this to attack a guy who's going after me, and what I'm about to write is when a nobody puts real in front of their username, it is a sign of extreme inferiority complex. Don't worry, nobody on earth will pretend to be you. It's a level down.
I mean, so their handle is real something.
Yes,
Okay. Well, there's the real Donald Trump. He's real.
exactly. If you think that somebody is going to impersonate you, and so you have to say, "Well, I'm the real one." My first response is, "Who are you? I've never heard of you." So, if you have to tell me you're the real one, and I've never heard of you before, then the fake one will have the same value to me.
Well,
And yeah,
I thought a blue check mark used to indicate
oh
that
God, yes.
he was verified. No longer.
Which goes back to what we were saying earlier on how Facebook has uh, changed. They're no longer going to have fact checkers. They're going to have community notes. And the reason for this is simple. It's because A, it costs money to have community notes, to have fact checkers, and B, nobody believes fact checkers. So now we're going to have majority rule on what is reality.
Do you guys feel
Right.
I'm talking too much?
Oh no,
Oh,
actually
please.
I wanted to ask you a question, Neil, since you're living in Indiana, and you have this feeling that it's very homogenous here and or there, and people are sharing similar beliefs, and it's quasi religious. I'm just curious, do you think these people are getting their information from like similar sources or one source, or like how are their beliefs are being formed? Like I'm sure there's reinforcement in different community organizations, the churches, their workplace, the schools and stuff like that. But do you feel like they have narrow access to information that could potentially help form narrow beliefs about climate change and various other issues?
Absolutely, and it's a lot of it's happening on social media. It's exactly this phenomenon where there are no gatekeepers, and I mean, you would not believe things that were written. We had a similar situation to what was that town in Ohio, Springfield, with their eating the dogs and cats. We got a Tyson plant. I think it's Coridon, Coridon, Indiana, where there's a Tyson plant with a bunch of Haitian immigrants, and so it was around before the election, similar to what just talk about what was going on in Coridon. with the immigrants, taking over and hurting the town. And you know, people are getting this information on social media. There was a little bit of investigative reporting done on local or sort of state regional TV, and but that was that reporting varied in quality. The Indianapolis newspaper, I think, did a pretty good job of being factual, and there were some good editorials, but most of the lunatic BS is on social media. And oh yeah, talk radio. If you I don't know if any of you have ever traveled across, I road trip. I'll flip through the AM dial, or well, I guess it's on FM now, but through across the entire country, all you hear, there's plenty of music, but there's religious programming, and there's right-wing talk radio, and all of this stuff, all the loony shit is all over right-wing talk radio. And
Well,
so go ahead.
can I just add to that? I just happened to look at YouTube podcasts, and the number one podcast on YouTube is Joe Rogan.
Uh-huh.
And that's he's international, I guess, but he's massively influential nationwide. And I've been paying attention to him recently, and he's horrible. It's it's just, you guys have probably all seen the clips of Trump talking about California water coming from Canada, and I think he said something like, comes down from Canada to California and through Los Angeles. And, this whole smelt thing. These are exactly, beliefs and tidbits that get incorporated into this culture and disinformation sphere uncritically. And, you know, I mean, none of these people
Look,
are fluent in
if
stuff.
I was, I'm sorry, I just have to,
Go
quickly
ahead.
break in. If I was Donald Trump, I would never use the word smelt in a sentence.
Okay.
Carry on.
No,
Who smell.
that's actually really funny. I do want to say a bit about the smelt as well, because I decided to do some fact checking of my own, and like Neil was saying earlier, the water in LA really had nothing to do with the reservoirs. It's the whole system relies on nearby water tanks located, downhill from different sites, and each of these water tanks hold 1 million gallons.
There were exactly
What happened?
3 tanks.
What happened? Yeah, exactly. And with all the pumping to stop the fires, the tanks needed time to be refilled to restore the pressure so the water could be flowing uphill.
Correct.
And then part of the problem also was the high winds prevented helicopters from dropping water from the air, which only increased pressure on the water tanks in the Palisades area. I don't know if people heard about this, but I think about 2 days into the firefighting, there were some Canadian firefighting planes that were sent there from BC, I think it was, and a drone had smashed into one and had caused a damage to it, and because of that, they had to basically, I guess, ground all of these planes until this one was repaired, and also until they were sure that people weren't flying drones into them. So I don't know if people heard of that, but and and about the smelt, first of all, it's a native fish to the San Francisco estuary, and there hasn't been a wild one in years, at least, that people have found. The part of the state's water supply is a part of the Sacramento water delta. It provides water to over 30 million people and 6 million acres of farmland across the state. The water is sent around the state via two systems with a giant network of reservoirs, pumps, and canals that are operated both by the state and the federal government. A large, or a a very small portion of the water goes to support wildlife, such as the San Francisco estuary. It's where the fresh water meets the sea. It isn't too salty, and it helps the entire ecosystem, including other fish and, of course, humans. It also improves the whole region's water quality and helps to ensure that the water that the farmers get for irrigation isn't too salty for farming. The other thing to add on to that is that there's a water pact that governs water usage. I think it's for like 7 states, maybe more. That was signed
And
in 19.
Mexico.
Oh, and Mexico. That's right. And it was signed in 1922. And any rain that wouldn't have been sent to these tanks would have been sent to the farmers before any reservoir was filled or anything like that. So basically, there's no additional water available to fight these fires, which, as fire experts have said, you could have the best fire brigade in the world there, and they would have been very hard to get under control any faster than they actually did. Besides all these complexities that happened, that they weren't able to fight the fire more efficiently.
There's two issues that are immediately proximate to this, and one, everybody who had a working fire hose in their house was standing outside spraying their roofs and spraying their front yards and whatever trees it was in their area, so that the fire wouldn't spread to their houses. So every single one of those is reducing pressure. Every house that collapsed, all of their interior pipes were destroyed. So unless there was some miracle that the person who owned the house closed the water before they left, those houses, all of the destroyed houses were leaks. So if you have hundreds of destroyed houses, your water pressure goes to zero. The water is going to go first to all of those leaky houses, and then it's going to reduce the incoming pressure spectacularly. So you can't just have pressure-based pumping. You have to have physical pumps inside of your equipment, and that's not going to increase the amount of water. That's just going to increase the distance you can throw it.
Sal, I don't know if you've seen, there was I guess it was a viral video of Elon Musk talking to a fire commander about the hydrant situation in Pacific Palisades that was clarifying. And basically, they said that under those circumstances, they have to bring in tank trucks, would be the short version. And one thing I'd mentioned, Kim, that the the reservoirs in California happen to be very full. They're mostly above their historic average levels for this time of year. And it part of what's going on with all of this Trump nonsense is that it was, I believe, I think it was like as recently as like November of 21, before the rainy season started, before all these atmospheric rivers hit California, that California reservoirs were very, very low, alarmingly so. And, this is around, there was national coverage of Lake Mead water levels being low around the same time. There was a lot of national press on how much water each almond required to grow around this time. And, all of that stuff is kind of in, ancient history. Not really, but, it's forgotten. So right now, I think people are, who aren't familiar with California water are all assuming that California doesn't have water when in fact it does. And then the other thing I'll say is that there is just this one reservoir in Pacific Palisades that is right there, that San Ynez Reservoir that people have latched onto, that is just a misplaced focus, because that particular reservoir is not connected to the fire hydrant. So you have this proximate, short-term problem with water pressure just as the fire was hitting, and there's basically been no problem, since day two. Okay. There's plenty of water. They brought in all these tankers. They brought in extra equipment. Nobody's complaining about water anymore. So it's just the disinformers who have not gotten past this bit of disinformation, and they sound as if they, this is, sort of defining the whole uh, occurrence of the fire, and the negligent and incompetence of Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass and so on. So it's again, we're back to disinformation and just ignorance, and how it just there's no gatekeeping on this disinformation. It's like some schmuck is equal to the governor of California, who is pretty much telling giving good information, and doing a decent job of handling the situation. I hope that's helpful.
And there's nothing you can do about disinformation except to spread information. There's nothing you can
Yes.
do to fight this except to challenge them, to describe what they're doing, what they're saying wrong. Uh, I put up on the Jumbotron, I don't know, half an hour ago, a paper that came out of Australia a few years ago. In the discussions that we've had over the last week, I have mentioned to people how you can have dry lightning. Lightning can form in dry. I know we're all used to lightning only being in rainstorms, but well, you can also have it in snowstorms. But you can have lightning in dry weather. And what you need to have lightning in dry weather is you need to have a very, very low humidity, and you need to have a lot of wind. And if you have those conditions, you create extreme uh, differences in ionic concentration between the ground and the air. Every time air flows past uh, physical obstructions, mountain, a hill, a little bit of a few electrons will scrape off of the air and will then travel to the surface of the earth. This is literally like rubbing rabbit fur. You're creating a static change where you have a static positive charge on one end, you have static negative charge on the other. Typically, because when you have a lot of humidity, the breakdown in air is very, very low. So you get constant static shocks in the air, and they redistribute the ionic charge. But when you had, and I was absolutely amazed to see that they had sub 1% relative humidity in parts of Los Angeles. This is just breathtaking.
Yeah.
The dielectric discharge becomes so great that when you finally do have a lightning strike, you're talking about millions of volts. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of amps of current. And it's like a gigantic laser beam. So it will cause fires anywhere. And Ali has a hand up.
Yeah, hi, yes. I was just going to add to, well, the lightning thing. I mean, if they're trying to work out, if they're trying to bang on about arsonists, it's just stupid. I mean, fires can start from anything, can't they? A bit of glass with the sun through it, lightning, obviously, an accidental fire, some idiot starting a barbecue somewhere, one of those little mobile barbecue. Fred, who's one of the rangers, is always catching people doing that or seeing the remains of it, and he's always pulling his hair out, what's left of it, when about how to stop that. So they're all, I mean, the rangers themselves are quite clearly, LA has a really good set of rangers that look after the the parks and so on. But no, my point was really about the deniers and the shills and the trolls and all the rest of them. There seem to be two particular types: the more professional ones that Sal and Gerald and other ninjas go after quite successfully. They are quite clearly more professional, and they obviously get paid quite well for what they do. So they are pretty lethal, actually, and they really, they are a worthy subject for dissimulating whatever. But there is a lot of sea lion trolls. I mean, I've come across a few just yesterday, I think it was, and they're a bit moronic. I mean, they don't really say anything. They don't. They come from various parts of the world, and they just want to keep you, there chatting away about nonsense for as long as possible, just to keep you away from doing sensible work on Twitter or Facebook or whatever on the climate. So I would say there are definitely two particular types. There are probably many more than two types, but there are two obvious ones, and that they are there to waste your time and to cause disinformation. So yeah, it's on the one hand, it's well worth nailing them. On the other, it's annoying having to do that because it does, they can waste so much of one's time. But yeah, let's get rid of them if we can. I personally think there should be a law about disinformation, but that's been churned over and over, I'm sure, many times because to lie is supposed to be kind of about specific things, especially where safety is concerned, and this is a very big safety concern. It's supposed to be a crime. I always thought it was.
I know it's funny, but it's like when I was when we were all brought up, we were brought up that you're going to work hard, you're going to study hard, and you're going to get a good job, and you're going to be a good person, and good things will happen to you. But a lot of people in the younger generations, they worked hard, they didn't get good jobs, they had a horrible economy to deal with, and they've learned how to distrust everything. So to them, lying is normal. Maybe it's because society lied to them. But to be really truthful, uh, before the uh, before the Reagan Revolution, where we changed the tax code and treated earned income from labor and capital gains income differently, you had a much more fair society. Now we tax capital gains at a tiny microscopic fraction that we do for labor. And what you're doing when you do that is you are setting up a society where a two-tiered society where you have one people who will work their entire lives and will never get ahead, and then you have other people who, because they started out in life with a savings account from their parents, they will be able to invest and they will be able to become extremely rich with almost no effort.
That's a really good point, Sal. And I think, in some ways, maybe LA is like a microcosm of that. It's the land of dreams. It's the land of inequality. It's also, this idea that we've got this beautiful place like Malibu that we can build and build and build on, even though it's next to nature and next to the Santa Ana winds that fly very warm, dry air from the Great Basin desert. This idea that we can, man can build there and live there despite all these natural disasters and tornadoes that continually just pound away at LA. The funny, not the funny thing, but I think somewhat ironic thing is that when they first started to develop Malibu and I guess the surrounding LA area back in the 1920s, there was a giant fire in the 1930s in the Pacific Palisades. And I've learned a little bit about this from the book called Ecology of Fear by Mike Davis. I haven't read it all. I've only read bits of it, and I would like to read it. But, you know, he says that LA is a bit of a juxtaposition in that the policymakers have allowed the real estate developers to just, you know, keep on developing on land that shouldn't really be developed on because it is so ecologically fragile and destructive and prone to natural disasters.
I want to take a step back to recap something you said earlier and to show the importance in this entire chain. Um, the Colorado River was developed mostly by federal funds. I think there's like 13 dams on the Colorado River. The Colorado River supplies all of the water, almost all of the hydroelectric power. It makes the southwestern United States live. If it wasn't for the, I'm going back to last week's, this was last week's topic. The Colorado River, all of that, all of that work that the government put in allowed it to go from chaparral and a few million people living there to about 40 million people living there. And now it is the home of the Phoenix aerospace industry, the Phoenix chip manufacturing industry, all of the California high tech that is south of San Francisco, all of California's amazing agriculture was all created. And of course, you know, don't forget Las Vegas and Henderson. None of these would have existed if it wasn't for the government building the Colorado River system. So, and at one point, yes, of course, you know, this is government project, and it's all of these people who live in these regions hate the government, despite the fact that they get literally everything from the government. And the other is that, yeah, the government did this in order to promote this region. And now this region has, I don't know, three, four times as many people as it should be able to accommodate. So, Julian has a hand. You has a hand.
Go ahead.
Oh,
The
we're,
other Julian
we
had a
have
hand.
two Julians today. That's good.
Yes.
Julian.
Julian. Either will do.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I've mentioned before, I lived in LA for a number of years. I know it well. I really feel deeply for everything that's going on there. Um, the whole water, like knowing, having ridden mountain bikes around the regions where a lot of the fires took place, the whole water issue is a non-starter to me. I mean, those canyons are so deep and have been so full of brush for such a long time that just access is absolutely impossible. I mean, even if there is no fire, there are many regions really close. Like the one region that I know very well is the Angeles National Forest. Not to be confused, it's not the Los Angeles National Forest; it's the Angeles National Forest to the north. It was pretty affected in these fires, and the vegetation there isn't chaparral, it's forest. These are big trees that must have been extremely dry at this time of year. I would imagine they went up like Roman candles, one after the other, and there would have been absolutely no way to stop a fire like that. um, I experienced several fires in LA during my years there, which were between, I think, 2000 to 2010. and some were pretty bad. Again, nothing on the scale of this. I wanted to just switch gears quickly and say something about disinformation. I was recently chatting with a person here on X. She's Justine, that woman Warren, and an experienced Egyptologist. She's a trained archaeologist, and she's now retired, and she spends a lot of time fighting disinformation here on X, specifically Graham Hancock and his ridiculous pseudo archaeology and pseudoscience theories about ancient Aztecs and I don't know what rubbish. I read her tweets so I don't have to watch Graham Hancock's Netflix. But recently, she said to me something about disinformation that I thought was really valuable, and she mentioned that a lot of people cling to irrational beliefs because of fear, and that seemed to me a really good point. A lot of these MAGA types, ultra alpha male, ultra uh, quotation mark macho types, are really scared. They're really insecure. The world is changing really fast in ways they can't predict around them, and they're afraid. And this is a fear is an emotion. It's a human emotion. All of us can empathize with. I mean, there is nobody. No, actually, there are a few people who have never been afraid, but they're probably sociopaths and psychopaths, and I don't want to hang with them in any case. But it all. I don't know why I keep having these cats of Sal's in my the Zen cats who are ever in the present moment. They're not worrying about climate change. They're not worrying about the future. They're not even worried about when they're going to get their next meal because I'm sure Sal will serve it up to them at the right time when it's dinner time for them. So
Or they will remind me.
there you go. And I mean, yeah, I don't know. I sometimes I find these characters, these ultra alpha MAGA males on here on X, and there's a side of me that feels really sorry for them because they are so afraid and so insecure. And
Yes,
yeah,
isn't this? I'm sorry to interrupt, but this to me is the most absolutely amazing paradox that all of these alpha males are they're not masculine in any way, shape, or form. They have no spirit, they have no guts, they have no truth, they have no honesty. They are everything a man is not supposed to be.
Tell us how you really feel.
I'd
how
agree with
is
that.
How is Donald Trump considered a man where he's a germaphobe? He's afraid of everything. He lies all the time. He is constantly suing everybody when he can't get his way, uh, and he refuses to pay. And everybody's out against. To me, if somebody tells me that everybody is out to get me, the first thing in my mind is you're a wimp.
Yes, and smelt.
Yes, and yeah, and don't stand downstream, or you will have smelt what he's been doing for the last few days.
That's funny.
But yes, these people are they've convinced other alpha males, or to be honest, read men who failed to mature properly. So as they grew up, they weren't able to establish good relationships with women. They weren't able to create and start families. They weren't able to make a solid living. And a lot of it, I hate to say it, we have institutional wealth, and we have people who hand wealth to their children, who then become more wealthy, and that continues. And these very rich people are the symbols of hope. for these very poor people who have nothing. And they do not understand that they will never be like their idols because they started in, okay, I've never mentioned this before, but I have a common law step brother. My mom, not they never had a legal marriage. My mom married his father when my dad passed away, and he took me into Greenwich Village to a synagogue where I was, I think, the only straight guy in the synagogue. And I got to meet everybody in the New York banking and real estate community, all of their kids, all of these gay, Jewish, wonderful men and women who knew everything about banking. And they were talking to me about, I forgot her name, the Queen of Mean. And all of these real estate developers. By the way, I never heard Trump's name mentioned during those real estate developers because he didn't matter. But all of these rich, rich, rich kids of real estate developers, it didn't matter to their parents that they were gay. And back then, this was literally the middle of the AIDS crisis. They wouldn't have mattered to them because they had their career paths. They were going to go to school. They were going to get their MBAs. They were going to get their go whatever else they needed to do, and they would take over the family business. And in 5 years, they would be millionaires and on the board of directors of any company that they wanted to, and they would be able to live forever in the most comfortable of terms. And this is not what you would see in you know this is not reality. This is not the real world. Most of the people are suffering and having difficulties making ends meet, and they have these visions of Donald Trump as being this absolute genius. When in the New York, in that community, in that time frame, he was considered almost persona non grata. So people what is the thing, you don't sell the steak, you sell the sizzle. um, he had help. They created this persona of him, of this incredible brilliant man who everything he touched turned to gold, and he bankrupted the Plaza Hotel. How do you take the single most valuable, well-known historic hotel on planet Earth and bankrupt it? Yeah, because he paid too much for the hotel. Because he hired all the best people. He spent a fortune on the right materials, but he couldn't sell apartments. So I know this is frustrating for all of us because we're living this now. We are now living the American nightmare instead of the American dream, and it's transferring to all of our allies. It's transferring to all of the nations in NATO and in the G7. And we don't know what's going to happen next because these lunatics who have no knowledge of how the real world works, but think they do, are going to be leading us. But the same thing applies for the climate denial community. It's the same exact methodology. These people think they know what's working, what's happening, but they never did the hard work. I'm constantly, whenever I'm in a discussion with these guys, and it reminds me, I had something yesterday about the true nature of skepticism. In classical Athens, skeptics were the people who did not believe in the gods. They, they just didn't believe that the entire system of multiple gods worked. So what did they do? They didn't just say gods aren't real. They discussed it between themselves and they studied it and they learned about it as much as they could. And if something pushed them to say, maybe this is correct, then the skeptics were able to become believers. And if they didn't see anything that would change their mind, they still were on the fence, but they would say, I don't have enough information to say that these gods are real. True skeptics believed in education. Modern skeptics don't want to learn. What they want to do is they want to hear all of these not skeptical, cynical voices that disagree with the mainstream and education and knowledge. So people will say that sea level hasn't risen, and they'll show me the chart for Vancouver, for one monitoring station in Vancouver, which, yeah, if you actually break the data down yourself, you will see that it has risen. But they're going to use this one data point that somebody else has curated for them because they knew that it was less than other data points, that this is proof that the whole world's sea level isn't rising.
I think those people are contrarians rather than skeptics.
Exactly. But they call themselves skeptics, and they
Yes, they.
don't want to learn.
Well,
And I've always been,
guys all know
yeah,
about Dunning-Kruger. They don't know
yes,
how little they know. That's a part of this. Can I say something about
and they don't care.
water?
Sure.
I just wanted to mention that LA there's a massive, well, there's an aqueduct that comes from the Owens Valley that was built in the early days, like maybe like in the teens, over 100 years ago, that goes to the Owens Valley is on the east side of the Sierra Nevada. And so there was a major aqueduct built early on that goes down to LA. And then there was also in the day, I think it was called the Feather River Project with California Aqueduct that runs like probably over half the length of the state from way the North Sierra, far north, maybe as much, it might be 150 miles north of Lake Tahoe, all the way down the Central Valley, and as the water's pumped over the mountains north of LA into a couple of large dams, the Castaic Reservoir and Pyramid Reservoir. So now LA gets much of its water from Northern California and still from the Owens Valley. And so the Colorado River as a source of water, there are still, I think, San Diego and probably other communities in Orange County and maybe eastern, Riverside might be getting water from the Colorado River. And certainly, Las Vegas and places in Nevada and, Arizona. But LA gets a lot of its water now from snowmelt sources, or snowmelt originated water sources in the Sierra Nevada, and then also the Owens Valley is dry, but it is fed from snowmelt from the eastern side of the Sierra. And there was a very large lake, Owens Lake, and Owens Valley was a major agricultural area that is now ruined by this water project because the water table and wells, ran dry and so on. So the picture is a little bit more complicated than what you said, Sal. Um, and I just, well, I guess, that's it for now. But I just wanted to add that, and it's important to understand. I've heard, this is kind of part of the gross misunderstanding of what's happening with LA water, because these reservoirs that are feeding LA right now are full. And, there really is no problem with water in California broadly at this moment. This will change, I would guess. But for now, they're kind of in a good spot with water.
Oh, by the way, I didn't want to I didn't want to sound like that I thought that California was getting all of its water from the Colorado. That is more Southern California, and that is, of course, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico,
Yeah.
and then finally uh, the Gulf of Baja California.
Yeah.
Can I say, if you want, I'm always plugging this book, but if you want to read a book about water, it's global water, but it does cover Californian water really well, to particularly the Colorado River and the Rio Grande, which is probably a little bit further east, I think, but even so, it's called When the Rivers Run Dry, and it's by an English writer and journalist called Fred Pearce, Pearce. Fred Pearce. Really recommend this book. If you like water, all things water, particularly rivers. It's really like, the cream cheese of all the water books. Really recommended it. It's my favorite book of all time. And also, what Julian started off about deniers, just to add that they are fearful. And so when people are fearful, what they generally do is they look at the fantasy rather than the reality. The reality is too hard to cope with. So they will look at the fantasy and they will make something up, or they will look at fairy stories and just go with that. Because that's easy to believe, isn't it? Because it's make believe, So that's meat and bread to them, as I see it. Just wanted to add that.
If the only thing we can do is I mean, it's um, before I was talking about the Greeks, now I'm talking about the Vikings. It's classical Viking. It's their the Norse religions. We are in a battle with evil, and we are going to lose. But how long can we keep up the good fight? And that's what we're here for. We're here to keep the good fight up for as long as possible. And maybe if we're lucky, we'll be able to keep fighting until the next generation takes over for us and continues the fight. I see Neil has a hand up. Neil,
Uh-oh.
please.
Do I have to take it away when I'm done? I will do that. Is there I did that.
Yeah, it help. Yeah, that can be painful at times. I think it's a toggle
I
that you
got it.
click on it and it turns off
Got
goes
it.
off.
Sorry.
Oh, I'll just add to what Neil was saying. I was just looking at the Inside Climate News, an article that they have on California water, and they were saying presently the Sierra Nevada snowpack accounts for approximately a third of the state's water supply, but this will likely drop by 55% by mid-century and by 80% as 2100 approaches.
Yes, absolutely. And it's had terrible outages as well, from decade-long shrivelings, if you like, and it's had them really worried. Once a year, the state governor goes up there and measures it. It's very interesting, It's thorough.
Oh, he actually goes up there and
Yeah,
measures it?
yeah,
Really?
yeah. Well,
I
it's
didn't know
accompanied.
that.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's off the top
Okay.
of my head, but it's a memory that's stuck. And yes,
Well,
they have had
it's
issues
the
in the past.
snowpack in the Sierra is closely watched because of
Mm.
its importance to the overall water situation in California. So you'll see reporting in the popular press about snow levels and just how that's going to impact water routinely, and it is massively important. I have to say, I'd be curious what Sal thinks about this going forward. I was kind of surprised by all these atmospheric rivers hitting California.
Oh, yeah. This is the Japanese have a name for it. It's called training, and it doesn't. It's not training as going to the gym and working out. It is how we seem to be developing stations on a rail line, and so every the next storm is going to follow exactly the same patterns. Part of it is because of the extra energy in the Earth's atmosphere is directing them. And the other part is it's just how the geology is already there. So storm today, storm tomorrow, storm next week, storm next month, until something causes the weather patterns to shift. The same places will get hit with the same intensities, and then eventually something's going to happen, and then it's going to break from that pattern.
Uh,
We had. I'm sorry. Go
all
on.
I was going to say is that it was leading up to that. I think the switchover kind of came. I think it was you know late fall of 21. I'm pretty sure there was a severe drought, and there had been so in 21 in the previous 10 years or so, about maybe like 7 of them had been drought years. And I think it was maybe, the
Sounds biblical.
right, so just the radical or, extreme change from a long stretch of dry. There was a big rainfall year leading up to some of the earlier, I think it was the 2017 Tubbs fire. There had been a big rainfall year, but then it got dry again after that. And while we're on that, I wanted to say one thing. You mentioned the dry lightning. Those particular fires, the really big one, I think it was the campfire that wiped out Paradise. That was a PG&E power line caused fire. And the big one that hit, I think it was called the Tubbs fire. That was a homeowner's some faulty electrical situation that triggered that one. And interesting, sort of germane to this broad role of climate change. I drove through that burn, kind of I was in Santa Rosa and I was headed back to Indiana, and I just went straight, headed straight east towards Davis, California, passing over by Lake Berryessa and so on. And then it must have been like 15 miles or so of burn. It was just so gut wrenching, heartbreaking, and, it's just one, shitty wiring situation in somebody's house blew up into
I,
massive fire.
I touched upon this last week. I'll
Sorry.
repeat it again because we no. I went into technical detail last week, and we have a new cast of characters, so I'm going to go through it again. Um, Obviously, power line failures are a great source of forest fires, possibly the single most important source of large fires. And what happens is that when electricity goes through a wire, uh, the metal in the wire heats up based on the amount of current going through the wire. So you get this incredible little feedback where as the wire gets hotter, then more energy is released by the wire. The wire gets hotter, the resistance increases, the wire gets hotter. So you have this positive feedback loop. What typically happens in hot weather, and again, the wires are hot because the weather is hot. People are turning their air conditioning on because the weather is hot, which is creating more power draw, which is making the wires hot, and the wires expand. So what's going to happen with the wires when the wires expand? Unfortunately, in this universe, they will not go up. The wires will go down as they expand. And this is called SAG. So you have catenary wires between every single power pylon. You have maybe 6, maybe 12 wires, and they're all separated from each other by insulators. And the loop that goes from one set of insulators to the next set of insulators is called a catenary. And as you get more and more heat and you get more power going through those wires, and the resistance increases and the feedback loop increases, that catenary is going to go lower and lower down. And it is possible that it could get close enough to strike a tree, or it could get close enough to strike brush, or it could even ground to the pylon themselves if the catenaries get low enough. So this is the feedback effect where climate change makes fires more readily occurring in power lines. All right, that was it.
I'm looking at the campfire, the one that got Paradise a single. What was it? It says it was a single hook. Where is it? It was an
An insulator, a hook
an issue.
that goes from the pylon.
Yeah, and this
So so
disrupted PG&E by the
so what you typically have is you have, let's say, every 50 meters you have a loop. If one of them breaks, now you have that loop is now 100 meters long. And if it's 100 meters long, it's going to touch the ground.
Yeah, it says the campfire was caused by a failure of a single metal hook attached to a PG&E transmission tower.
Which is why we got to do maintenance on these things. And it costs money, and it sometimes means that they have to then shut down the power for a day or two.
And it
But
cost them $30 billion.
That
think about the
that
wet markets. Think about the wet markets in China. How much money, how much cheaper the food is because they use those wet markets. Okay, until something happens that goes catastrophically wrong, and now you have a 1+ trillion, maybe 2 trillion, maybe $3 trillion global catastrophe, all because somebody wanted to get their bushmeat for a few pennies less.
This raises an interesting question about other, issues where there's disinformation, because there's still way too much controversy about the origins of COVID, given the science. It's another, just tragically stupid case of disinformation kind of winning the day. The FBI sided with the disinformers and, so on and so forth. And there's pretty much, they want to put Anthony Fauci in jail over this nonsense, and it's related to the other. It's kind of the same demographic that's disinforming on that kind of topic as we see with climate.
The peasants have pitchforks and they have torches.
it's an attack on science,
Really,
right? It's an attack on society advancing. It's an attack on like social cohesion as well. I was just thinking, you were saying that these fires that occurred in California, Neil, is it the campsite fire, or I don't remember the names of them, but that same year in 2021, in Linton, British Columbia, there were some
Oh,
horrible fires there. And that was also when the fire broke out there, it was the temperature broke a record of 49.6 degrees Celsius. This is, northern British Columbia. It should never reach that temperature. It got so hot that it caused propane tanks on trains to explode, and it melted the train tracks there. So, yeah, that's pretty horrible.
yep,
did anybody? By the way, Kim, I heard breakup on your side. Did everybody hear what she said?
I did.
Okay, so maybe it's me. Uh,
Oh, sorry. I'll just add to Neil, when you said you were driving through the 15 miles of devastation after these fires, I was just wondering if you
all right, this is one of those terrible points where I don't know if everybody is on or if I'm off.
I hear you.
Good, because I lost her again.
Yep, can hear you, Sal. Yeah.
Can you hear
So
me now?
yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Verizon commercial.
um,
Can
I'm
you hear me?
thinking about yes,
Okay,
I
fine.
can hear you.
It's 2025. Why are we doing this?
I just wanted to ask Neil if he experienced solastalgia, which is like nostalgia, but take the words solace and algia. Solace meaning desolation, and algia meaning pain and suffering. And if you experience that, which is like a form of um, like emotional abandonment due to environmental change, which is usually very destructive.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll share some pictures that I have of this. And the short answer is yeah. And I grew up in California. I was pretty outdoorsy, cross country ski backpacked, went to the same place I will share pictures of. And I remember it. I mean, of course, there have always been fires, but it's the whole, that's all accelerated since I've left. And, so I go visit, and it's heartbreaking to see what's happened. I used to deliver newspapers with my brother in Pacific Palisades. The place where we would, get the LA Times and deliver newspapers is gone. Heck yeah. It's horrible. Um, I yeah, picture that you can also see at Liberias. There's what's called, I think it's called the glory hole. I have a picture that I'll share of this with Sal, Kim, and the water level. I mean, I'd been by this spot numerous times, and it's a kind of a safety valve for the dam. It's my understanding, but it's a big crete opening that water flows through, and the water level every time I'd passed through by there as a younger person, water was flowing into this hole. I went by, and the water level was down like 35 feet or so, and it just makes all of this climate change stuff feel so real and ominous, because you're looking directly facing the results of what's happening. And just, I mean, I know enough to know it's not going to get better for the foreseeable future. It's rough. If you're forced to confront the harsh reality right there in front of your face. It's just not a pretty picture. And further,
Here's.
go
Oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry.
One other thing.
Here's what I see, and I see that every one of us is paying more money every single year for our homeowners insurance. We're paying more for our automobile insurance. We're paying more for home repairs. We're paying more in inconvenience. We're paying more for our eggs and our milk. It's only getting worse.
I was just recently in New Mexico, and I could tell. I mean, I'm a plant person, so I'm looking closely at plants, seeing like older trees that are dying. That obviously, this was between Gallup and like it's a Navajo. My son's student teaching on a Navajo reservation near kind of close to Shiprock, Four Corners area. It's on the Navajo reservation. But I could just see on the school side or walking seeing the trees that were planted. There was like a Douglas fir there and a spruce that were planted, but native, locally occurring trees. But you could just see that they'd done fine for decades, and now they're in an extended drought. They're struggling. There are trees that are dying. You can just see things transforming before your very eyes if you look. And for somebody, I mean, if you're sensitive, it's like I've been looking at plants for a long time. It's like, you know it's obvious, as has been mentioned, but it's upsetting. I mean, I don't, it's kind of old news,
Um,
but yeah.
um, yeah, a lot of us feel the same way. I, I was talking earlier how, yeah, I did my 5 miles today, and I'm out there almost every single day, as long as I'm healthy and as long as I have the time. And I've been that way for years, and that's how I grew up. I was lucky. My mom was raised on a farm, and she was really deeply into environmentalism in her own special way because if you lived your life, if you earn your fortune, what little it is from the land, you have an affinity to it. Even though I was a city boy, I was raised to respect and love the land. And we're all feeling that pain now because we're seeing it die in front of our eyes.
Well, yeah. Come to Indiana. We got snow. Our reservoir is full. We need we need people who aren't right wing Christians.
I'm just continuing on in this general thread, but there has been some horrific damage to bird populations other than chickens, and we've been seeing that in the last few years. And spring migration is going to start in about 2.5 months, and I'm afraid that I'm going to be spending 60 or 70 consecutive days, and I'm going to go no matter what, and I'm going to be out in the field every single day, and I'm going to be terrified that I'm not going to see the species that I saw 2 years ago, or 4 years ago, or 10 years ago.
Well, Kim is the only person I've ever seen post anything on X about insect biomass. And, I mean, is this something that just, I'm waiting for somebody to write the next Silent Spring. That's kind of something I've thought a lot recently is how are the birds going to survive when insect biomass is dropping precipitously? And again, as somebody who road trips across the United States, I mean, if you're in agricultural areas, you don't get bugs on your windshield anymore. I've been driving across the center of the country, since I was 5 years old. And, you used to have to spend, 5 minutes getting the bugs off your windshield at every
Oh
stop for
God!
gas.
Oh
And
God! There's nothing
yeah,
left.
There's nothing there. What are the birds going to eat? So where's the next?
and
We got to find somebody who's gonna, a good writer who's gonna come up with a Silent Spring like important book. We need this because the thing is, Silent Spring was written about this, DDT spraying of forests in New England, and that was localized. And this is the insect biomass reduction is it global? It's certainly happening it's not localized. That is for sure.
I remember the first papers on it were in the UK and Germany.
Exactly.
So it's a global. It is definitely global.
Yep. And nobody knows really. I mean, I'm not seeing anything. And I mean, there's occasional articles where, it'll be linked to neonics and, changes in, the seasons and so on. But being a bug person, I'm inclined to believe it's pesticide related. And, neonics are broad spectrum persistent pesticides, and they're, they're all over. They're used in the United States. They're banned in Europe, I think. But that's an interesting case. Like, why? I'm curious what the theories are in Europe. Anyway,
Well,
And they
there's
yeah,
also
and they didn't
some
use the same.
there's also
They
some
didn't use the same. Oh,
insects.
sorry,
Oh, sorry. There's also
but
some
they had
in.
it. Go
I'll
go
be quiet.
go.
No, I was just going to say about the insects. There's some insects that co-evolved with certain plants, and we took away those plants, so the insects end up dying. So it's like much more complex, I think, than just pesticides. Also, I think as more insects become less abundant, animals eat insects that they normally wouldn't eat, and that also influences the insect population. But in general, about the topic about the landscape changing and the ecology changing, I mean, I guess in general we have an acceptance of it, or I should just talk about myself. I know on one level I accept it, but on another level I don't. Because I think it's too painful, and it's too much. We're too much a part of it to accept the loss of it, or I like the idea of like the great diminishment rather than extinction, because they're still around, but they're greatly diminished now. So, which is painful.
I think that's right. One thing I think people like this group may, not recognize, and as somebody, I used to deal a lot with sort of customer service related, talking to regular people about their bug problems. And, you know, generally people think of them as being repulsive or nuisance. And if they're made to go away, the great
The people or the
people are
bugs.
just happy about it. And similarly, living here in Indiana, when we have unseasonable warm weather, people are just happy about it. They're not thinking, oh my God, we're doomed. This is climate change related. This is only going to get worse. They're more inclined to just be thinking, oh, I can wear my shorts today. So the bug thing, it's just somehow the alarm should be being sounded, I guess, would be the broad.
Uh,
Maybe birds are a way into this, but they're really
don't say the canary.
okay. But
But I think, excuse me, what we need is a marketing department for insects, because I took part in some online monarch butterfly course, and people are willing to travel thousands of miles to see where they overwinter. And it's because they're acceptable bugs and they're beautiful, and they have an interesting life cycle. But if we could do that for other bugs, and also make people realize that we're dependent on them, as I think E.O. Wilson said about the ants and all the little insects, our humanity is dependent upon the insects, then maybe people will have a different perception of them.
I need to break in. About, I don't know, 2 minutes ago, he said something, and if you could have monitored my heart rate, I went from 70 to 150 in like 2 seconds flat. In 1992 or 1993 in New York, and not just New York, of course, we had the first major West Nile virus outbreak. And as a result of the West Nile virus outbreak, up and down the East Coast, they started to do pesticides in every single water district. And we flooded the zone. We went crazy. And maybe this is our benchmark when all hell started to break loose, when we just threw everything we had at Mother Nature because we didn't want people to get West Nile virus. And after that, a few other newer viruses have come in, all insect borne. Maybe we did, I mean, we obviously did this to ourselves, but maybe it's because we overreacted to protect people in big cities or in some other areas. Because I travel, up and down the East Coast, and you have mosquito districts everywhere whose job is essentially to steal money from the local treasuries and to just pump pesticides into every single estuary and waterway and lake. And I think we just went crazy overspraying to prevent West Nile virus, to prevent, now it's chikungunya. What's the other one? There's a few other modern, I hate to say it, but these are tropical diseases that are moving with climate change and moving with invasive species. 20 years ago, if you were in this part of the country, you never saw an Egypti mosquito. All you saw were the typical East Coast mosquitoes. Now we're seeing the tiger mosquitoes, the Egypti. Tiger is a beautiful definition. If you've seen them, they're actually quite pretty. Black and white stripes on their legs and on their thorax. And you never saw them, and now you do because they couldn't survive North American winters, but now or this part of North America's winters. So now they can. So they've established themselves, and they've brought old world diseases to the new world. And so because nobody, we would rather uh, kill everything rather than be precise and go for surgical methods. We've just gone overboard.
This is analogous to what happened with the gypsy moth, and it was aerial spraying of large expanses of forest for the gypsy moth, which is an imported insect from Europe that I think came in late
Um,
19th century. And they were, DDT's broad spectrum kills every bug. They're spraying it over large areas, and they don't do that now. And surprise, surprise, it's not really a problem. So yes, they
uh,
overreacted.
you cannot call them that anymore.
Oh, what do they call? Oh,
They are now spongy moths.
okay.
They are now the spongy moth. That is that is now a politically incorrect name for the moth. We still do get epidemics of them.
Bob.
We had one this year in New York State, and it was horrifying. They
What do you
were their droppings.
bugs are good? Yeah, I know there's still outbreaks, but it's tough.
What we need to do maybe is just be surgical. If your schoolyard has spongy moth outbreaks and the kids are getting sick because of this, then find places in the schoolyard, the track and field areas that are further away from the buildings to have the kids play, so they're protected from the insect droppings, and you don't have to just bomb the whole damn school and kill all the insects, and of course not just the spongies, but all the beneficials and all the spiders that are eating those moths,
Yeah.
those caterpillars.
Yeah. SpongeBob.
Well,
If you get SpongeBob in, he'll deal with it.
You just described, Sal, integrated pest management, which is, pretty much what is done in pest control in much of agriculture. And in my early days in the late 70s, I was doing this very thing that you're describing, which was trying to minimize. I worked for people who were minimizing pesticide use on urban shade trees, and also in schools for cockroach control. And so the whole idea was I consulted with the city of Modesto, and they were overusing pesticides. Just It was just eye popping, and within a 2-year period, we were able to wean them from using very toxic systemic. They would inject the insecticide into the trunks of these trees, and they were also spraying a lot of malathion on. Thousands of trees were being treated, and we eliminated this pesticide use pretty much completely within a 2-year period. Without, that's, I spent a lot of time talking to people, telling them, well, would you rather have the whole neighborhood sprayed with malathion, or you want some aphid poop on your car? And that was very effective. And it's pretty much exactly what you described, which was all of the treatments were targeted, and we tried to avoid using toxics as much as possible, which is exactly the opposite of what was happening with what triggered or led to the Rachel Carson writing Silent Spring.
Did Jim just
We chased
put his hand
people
up?
away.
Uh,
You know what? I'm gonna have to leave. I gotta go. I have a rehearsal. I gotta prepare. I'm glad. I just want to say,
please.
glad I chimed in today. I enjoyed this, and I'll be seeing you guys again.
You can't
It was
leave
our
before
pleasure.
Jim speaks.
Yes, stay for Jim. Thank you for
Yeah,
coming.
new rule. You can't leave when there's a hand raised.
Oh, okay.
That's a good one, actually.
Okay. Well, I love hearing what you say, and I will wait.
Yeah, I was just going to mention on the subject of insect control and getting away from the pesticides. I've read technical articles and some of the book of a book by Jonathan Lundgren, and I'm sure Ed can chime in on this. And but anyway, it was so enlightening. He's an agricultural entomologist, and 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 we know that plant diversity creates insect diversity, and through complex mechanisms that are not fully understood, this naturally suppresses the impact of insect populations. So we say this over and over again. We've got to get away from monocultures, and monocultures have been taken to the ridiculous, where Nebraska grows corn, Kansas grows wheat. I mean, it's ridiculous, and we know down at a fine scale of granularity, plant diversity creates insect diversity and complexity, and it brings down the pressure of the insects without insecticides, and there are other avenues. I think we should leave no stone unturned. For example, there's the biodynamic school of organic architecture, organic agriculture, which embraces the use of various plant teas to spray and on and on. But I'll end it there, and maybe Ed will chime in.
So, Ed, do you want has Ed been?
Sure. I
Yeah, you're good.
continue. Yeah, one of Jonathan Lundgren's sayings is for every pest that we consider a pest in the insect world, there's 1,700 beneficials. So why are we focusing on that one? In agriculture, in regenerative agriculture especially, our farms now that are established in it, pesticides are no longer needed at all. We've realized that the problem was our plant health, and that when you have healthy plants that have one simple way we measure it is just by the Brix level, the sugar level, they become toxic to insects, to all insects. So once you get your Brix level up high enough, and all we do to focus on that is have a good soil biome and a real strong measurements of our minerals in our plants and in our soil. So many of our soils have all the minerals they need, but they don't necessarily have the microbiology developed to deliver them properly to the plants. Some soils are lacking in certain important minerals, and so what we have to do is monitor them, and simple application of like a foliar application of a mineral at the right time builds up the resistance in that plant. Not necessarily the chemicals that we think of as like internal pesticides, but just that health of that plant. And then we don't have a pest problem. So, I mean, it's something that is and pathogens. There's not one plant pathogen or one plant insect pest that we haven't been able to solve with just nutrition and biome. So, and we need to think about, and that, of course, that restores. Jonathan Lundgren just finished the largest biodiversity study ever done on farmlands, well over 1,000 farms, and looking at the complete biodiversity of these farms, because in the global climate movement, you hear about biodiversity as being a problem. The problem here is they talk about it and that it's very important, and of course it is, but they haven't really worked on the science very much. And so, like in this study that Jonathan just completed, and now he's just crunching all the data, and it's just showing that plant diversity, critter diversity, soil microbe diversity, making sure that the whatever's on that environment is healthy, which is often, again, related to the nutrient availabilities it has. And of course, now we're doing the metabolomics, so we can take those plants, analyze them, which are our crops, and find out where their nutrition level is to keep us healthy. And of course, what we have determined is that 90-something% of the fruits and vegetables and foods that are created on a farm are within the 10th to 20th percentile of the amount of nutrients and the nutrient variation that they have. And it's pretty much tied with tilling, chemicals, the way we've treated the soil biome and the planetary biome and the water. So, and then all of a sudden we just see massive insects. I mean, it's like a symphony. You can go to visit a farm and you can visit the farm next door. And like somebody mentioned almonds earlier, we're doing a hell of a lot of work in almonds and regenerative, which is cutting down water use incredibly, because almonds are incredibly thirsty. And so that's going to make a huge difference. Plus, when we plant the biodiversity in these almond orchards, they don't need the pesticides, and they also respire some moisture and retain moisture. So you don't have that re-radiance of these giant farms in California that just re-radiate all the heat back up, and there's no moisture in it. And so that creates more problems. Same with the fires and the Hadley cell issue of this dry air that keeps coming, circulating from the equator through desertification into higher and higher north. And, now we're seeing that infiltrate with the dry season that they had, followed by this intense hot, dry air. It's just a bad recipe. So I'll land it there.
We have a major problem, and yes, let's just for argument's sake say we've solved how to get insects back onto the farms. How do we get them back into the cities? How do we continue the progress to other parts of our environment? Because yes, of course, obviously, I'm not going to say anything, no, anything at all about farms. On this part of the United States, the East Coast of the United States, you have the East Coast Flyway, the Atlantic Flyway. And the Atlantic Flyway is the main, in this part of the world, migration route for bird migration. If we lose the insects on the coastal cities, it doesn't, that's going to be gone. So the populations are going to crash. How do we convince people that we have to do something? And the problem is always that you have to convince people that their their ultimate goals are not today, but the future.
I was just in New York, and I think it was July, and I went on the High Line. Have you guys heard of this thing?
Yes.
I'm amazed at how many bumblebees, nectarivores. They planted all these good nectar, plants there, and it was amazing to me how much insect life there was there, right in the middle of Manhattan. And there are things that can be done. And I'm sorry, what's the name of Jim? Was that Jim that was just speaking? Uh,
Uh,
Wait a minute.
Ed.
Ed, sorry. Ed, I'm curious what you guys, I have peaches with codling moth and fire blight. What do I do? It's a lot of work trying to deal with this for me.
Get your soils healthy again. Understand the soil biome. You can go to my profile on Twitter. I have a YouTube playlist of all the stuff that regenerative ag is working on. A lot of the science, we're deep into the science. We're much more, I would consider we're much deeper into the science than traditional ag has been, certainly the chem-based ag, which has been a problem because at universities, they sort of refused, especially in land stewardship, because it's land stewardship, it's not just agriculture. So you have your cities that those soils aren't healthy of what they have in the parks. And then, of course, you have your suburbs with all the ChemLawn people going through, spraying all the time. You just end up with larger and larger areas that aren't really habitable for the insects or all the things that deal with insects, the bats, the birds, bees, all those sort of things are all part of the cycle. And so, it always, if you have a pest problem, you have a plant health problem. And so you have to solve your plant health problem. And that always starts with your soil health problem. We've even determined that, like in food production, when we look at that nutrient variation in crops, it's the number one factor is the health of that soil, the microbiology functioning in that soil connected to the plant that gives it the low nutrition level. And of course, when we don't get good nutrition, it's like putting bad gas in your car and you wonder why your car isn't running right. We often say that there's more careful, not that it's perfect, on gasoline that goes in our car than food that goes in our gut. And so,
Right.
that's why we have these problems. I mean, you have
Um,
to look, we always say it's the root of the problem. It's why. Why do I have pests? Not our farmers, we got sick of waking up in the morning and being told what we had to kill today. And we knew that was wrong. Now we wake up in the morning is how can we add more biodiversity to our ecosystem that we're stewarding? And the more we can spread that into the cities and into the suburbs and land stewardship in general, the better off we're going to be. But of course, there's a lot of industry who just wants to keep selling these inputs and selling the nitrogen fertilizers and selling the miracle grows and selling the rototillers. And, that's just working against us. So hope that helps.
Excuse me, Ed. Thank you for that information. I was just wondering if you could go through how homeowners increase their soil health.
Stop using the chemicals. Stop demanding that lawns have to be just, grass. Nothing else. Homeowner associations that won't let people, plant herbs and forbs and legumes and all other plants on their property. Not mowing your grass down to a half an inch all the time and having people get fined if they don't. Creating ecosystems, instead of these managed, like they might as well just be astroturf. Of course, in California, they don't want to grow grass because it'll use up the water, so they put astroturf down. And if they don't realize that it's the soil microbes and the diversity of plants that keep the water cycle going, so we don't have all this flooding. I mean, any city, any suburb now, you get a half an inch rain and it just floods off. Water stays dry. I mean, the soil stays dry underneath. We have a little demonstration we do on farms to show how that happens. It's one of the number one ways farmers wake up and say, gee, this doesn't work right. And that's what's happening on our farms. So, and then it just needs to spread into suburbs and cities and especially into universities that unfortunately are still funded by the chem industries. And of course, all the PhDs, because, they always thought, and we kept telling them for the last 50 years that microbiology was very important. They kept saying, because they were all trained in chemistry, it was the one thing that we could measure until recently. Now we can use metagenomics. We can understand how these systems work. We just discovered how plants actually eat, ranching bacteria. I mean, all these things, when you don't have an academic system when you have one that's dependent on PhDs that have to go 6 or 7 years in school to get the PhD to be able to teach or to do research, and they don't have departments teaching it. So if you don't have teachers teaching it, you can't have students learning it, and then it just falls apart. So that's why, there's a thing called the DeSci movement, which is decentralized science, where it allows people to study things that aren't necessarily funded in academia to create paradigm shifts where we actually consider that microbiology is extremely important. And it's not something that we just have to think we need to kill all the time, like we did with antibiotics or pesticides. Antibiotics are very important for health, but we also discovered there's something called probiotics. And that's one way you avoid often needing, the same as we've done with plants, create a healthy plant through nutrition and biome, and it becomes resilient. We've lost our resilience on this planet.
I want to get Harold into this. He's had his hand up for a while, but I want to mention a couple of very minor notes. There have been very there have been branches of the sciences, specifically astrophysics, ornithology, insectology, insectology. I know there's a better name for that. That have had so much influence by community scientists amateurs who devoted their lives to the study. I mean, I can't think of anyone more famous than Audubon or see, I can't remember his name. But there've been but most of that field came from dedicated amateurs who studied the topic in the field and they enriched it and grew it and created the modern sciences that we know. Uh, okay, Harold.
Oh, good morning, or afternoon, wherever you are. Can you hear me? Is this?
It's evening somewhere. Yes.
Well, thanks for the space. Oh, I came in to hear some of this disinformation, but I heard you guys talking about, um, agriculture and it is important of, how we proceed and grow our food. And one of the things that I noticed is that, there are academics that are free to research and do their own scientific inquiry. In Canada, there's a university called the University of Guelph, and actually they formally began a department of microbiome that deals with climate, agriculture, like importing critters from other places, and they have about 15 doctors that actually study this formally. I know some of the academics at Guelph have been studying the microbiome for decades. It's not new, but it is important. And, the more that we learn, the more that we can do some things better. Now, where I am in North America, I happen to sit on the lens of uh, indigenous nations, and this place was the first place in North America to receive apples from Europe, and they grew apples here for the King of England, and it was one of the largest apple producing places in North America, and now it's all gone. And the reason it's all gone is because of
May I
a
ask?
blight.
May I ask? May I ask if you're in Annapolis Valley?
No, Annapolis Valley, actually,
Okay, never mind.
Annapolis Valley took us.
Or are you allowed to ask?
Annapolis Valley put this place out of business because Annapolis Valley had better conditions. Where I am is highly humid, and it spreads this blight on any stone fruit and apples, and it really you can't grow any kind of that type of food here, simply because of the indigenous fungus, right? And this microbiome and this ecosystem here is among one of the healthiest in the world. It supports that flyway that you discussed for the birds, for the migrating birds. So this territory is extremely, extremely healthy. There's no chemical agriculture here. But nonetheless, if you want to go into growing peaches here, you're going to have a rude awakening that it's not a good place to grow peaches. And you got to find a better place. And one of the things that, when we look at agriculture and climate, is doing things smarter. And one of the things that I do, or I've been focused on, is, food security and climate security. And if you look at indoor farming for some products, I think indoor farms provide an advantage in cities and free up agriculture to grow other products. Um, and having that location, close to market, having a system that's protected from uh, bugs, fire, pollution. So you basically control the microbiome in the system, and you produce healthy food locally for people. And I guess when you look at agriculture, you know, uh, from the top down sort of perspective, the vehicles that are used, the transportation that is required, the cold storage that is needed. When you start doing all this math, you see there's better ways and better solutions out there. So it's a great discussion, but with the wildfires, I mean, you can't really stop these natural disasters and risks. So I thought that, moving forward, having, secure food systems that can produce healthy organic food for people is one of the solutions, moving forward. And that's, I've seen a lot of companies doing this, and I think it's the way forward is to, use the land that you do have wisely with food crops that work best for that zone, because a lot of the zones are changing. It's really changing fast in Canada. Our zone is now two zones, kind of like it used to be a five or even like a 4A, 5B, but now it's kind of like a six, so the growing seasons are changing. And I think I've mentioned this before, when you change the CO2 um, and the composition of our atmosphere, it actually changes the composition of the microbiome in the soil. And that can impact the plant that you are using. Even if it is in healthy soil, it may not be the optimum condition for that plant. So, one of the things that I did want to share with the group is I believe in using natural solutions. And one of the things that I had trouble with was tomato blight. And I tried fermenting tomatoes and a mixture of oak leaves and soils and stuff like that. And then it suggested that you spray that on the tomato plant. And it makes sense that the tomato plant and the tomato fruit contain all the nutrients that tomato plant needs to grow pretty well. Um, and the idea that overwhelming a blight with a complex spectrum of microbiome to compete on that leaf surface, it works. And it was an interesting little breakthrough for me. And I also wanted to share that I've been building toad farms and a frog farm, and my slug problem is gone. But now I have 5 different species of amphibians in my garden. And, that idea of a balanced ecosphere, I think is, and a diverse, food crop that's the way to go. If you can figure out how to trick nature using nature, I love it. And I found another way actually for slugs to control my slug population was to use a weed that called goldenrod. And
Oh
if
yeah.
you pull up the goldenrod and bruise it, it sends out a plant distress signal, and the slugs follow that. And they'll eat the goldenrod and they won't touch your seedlings. So I made that breakthrough this year. And it saved all my cucumbers and squash because the slugs, it's really wet here. So, the slugs are can destroy, but I've beaten them this year, and I'm very proud of it because there's so many things like people trying to use chemicals for slugs, copper and salt and all these things don't work. But you know just using these simple natural systems, I think, is the way to go. And we talk about complexity and microbiome and how this is all new and stuff, and it actually is kind of I'm not an expert on indigenous sciences, but it reflects the complexity of that understanding of nature. And I think that as you know we integrate those two knowledge systems, they can use each other for better food security. So anyways, I always thought, like, our biggest challenges in agriculture are pollution from the agriculture, things like from animals and from the vehicles. Um, I think there's a lot of advantages to innovating a lot of these things. And I think that, an electrified um, fleet of farming vehicles, you know, these would also have a huge impact on the local environment because of pollution, but also the climate. I'll leave it at that.
You guys have just really blown my mind with like 14 million topics for the future. But I'm gonna give it to Ed in 30 seconds. I just wanted to mention one thing very, very quickly. This world's second largest exporter of produce is the Netherlands, and it is almost all internal. It is all indoor uh, indoor plant growth. Okay,
Yeah,
Ed,
it's
cheers.
like that in
Oh,
southern Ontario. We grow a lot of fruits and veggies for America that way. Yeah.
Yeah, one person you might want to check out, and his initial story was very connected to blight, is John Kempf, Kempf. He has a company called Advancing Eco Ag, and they do a lot of work in this area. He grew up in an Amish farm family in northeast Ohio, which has one of the areas with the most moisture and the least amount of sunshine during the year. And people think that the Amish weren't into chemicals and stuff, but actually they have been. And his dad was a chemical salesman, and they had the most up to date pesticides, herbicides, whatever. And John, when he was young, got his license to apply these. And they had an interesting couple of situations. One is they grew a lot of vegetables, and one thing they grew was cantaloupe. And so, and cantaloupe can be very accessible, very susceptible to blights. And they had a field that they had been using the chemicals on, and because of the moisture in the summer, the heat too, they had like several years in a row where the blight was just devastating. And they had a field next door to them that had just been grazed, had never really had the chemicals on, and wasn't heavily grazed too. So it still had some soil health to it. And so they ended up, I don't know whether they leased it or purchased that land. And I said it was right next to the field they had been doing the cantaloupe in. So they just plowed right across the whole thing and planted cantaloupe amongst it all. Well, they had another wet and hot summer, and the land that they had been growing on was again hit by the blight. The new land had absolutely no blight. I mean, he said it was to the point of vines intertwined between the two, with none compared to heavily hit. And they also went to that same year they went to a Acres conference, which is a sort of organic regenerative type magazine, and got went to a lecture on health problems and environmental problems with these pesticides, of which his dad decided that's it, we go home, we're not doing this anymore, and the chemicals. And so that sent John and his dad on a mission to understand how to do this. And now he's able to do it. They're able to grow the cantaloupes without a blight problem, because it's what he determined was it was part of the soil health, and it was part of the nutrition that the plants weren't getting. In fact, John and his company have just created the first field handheld meter that's going to be able to go out in the field sensing with 3 different sensors on it, to be able to measure the mineral content of your seed, of your plant, and of your soil, so that and as we learn what these plants need at certain times of the year, so that you add them to it. If you don't have enough processing, or like a lot of areas, they're just weak in selenium naturally or whatever, that's very important for plant health. You can solve those problems, but I'd highly recommend checking out Advancing Eco. And the newest thing that we've determined is what was wrong with our seed production, and that we realized that the seeds weren't grown in healthy soil. We didn't consider epigenetics, and we didn't think about the nutrition or the biome in that seed. So when the seed is planted and it germinates, it's very susceptible because it just doesn't have the health. And we had become used to that. And now he's had a inoculant for people that still have to, but we find that if you grow seeds indigenously in your local area, considering epigenetic, using landrace varieties, that you can build that seed biome and nutrition level so that when they hit the ground, same like a baby being born, if it doesn't have the right biome, doesn't go through the mother's channels to get, that inoculation, doesn't have good nutrition, it'll have a lot of health problems in the future. The same thing with a seed. So worth seeds and the whole focus on GMOs and gene editing and the DNA of the seed, we've realized was really the wrong approach. And that's changing now. So lots of changes, lots of paradigm shifts coming in agriculture.
Well, I just want to say that there is, well, I moved to Berkeley to go to school in 1974, and by the time there was virtually no organic produce available. And now there is a ton of organic produce available, not only in Berkeley, but at Kroger, at Walmart, at, you know, everywhere. It's everywhere. Well, it should continue to trend in this direction. I think we all agree. And I want to say that I heard a link to this guy, Stephen Pavich, who was a similar story with grapes, the Central Valley of California, where he kind of got to this impasse with his grape vineyards. And this would have been in the 70s, and he flipped to organic. He was having problems with pests and production, and he flipped to building up the soil. And I think Sal shared the link about this guy. And the last thing I want to say is that it's interesting to me that we've been talking a lot about principles that were laid out by Sir Albert Howard in the early part of the last century, I think. And he's one of the fathers of organic agriculture. But just the simple principle that nutrients can't move up the food chain into your body, into a plant, and so on, unless they're in the soil. And, it's really great to hear you guys, just be pushing forward on the science and technical side of this. And when I was reading this stuff, God, is it, ugh, almost 50 years ago, uh, it just it's, you know, makes perfect sense. I mean, there's just these nutrients don't come out of thin air. And he lays out these principles very clearly, and he did it from his own personal observations. I think he was in India, just raising cattle and just all kinds of agricultural crops and so on. And lastly, about the diversity thing, heck yeah. I mean, I can see it just on my property. I let things grow. And just looking now, everything's covered by snow in my yard right now. I have a third of an acre, but I have more footprints in my yard from bunnies, deer, groundhog, feral cats. There's more uh, by far than any of my neighbors. And it's directly related to me living on this property and letting things go and promoting diversity and being a champion of diversity. And I see it with bugs. I see it with the mammals, birds. We have tons of birds. You and you know it's too bad that more people aren't aware of this. And I thank you guys for doing what you're doing. And I got to cut out. So enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Neil. Keep on doing what
uh,
you're doing.
Well, it was my
I
pleasure.
want 30 seconds, and then we can continue. I see
Okay.
Mary has a hand up, and we'll definitely get to Mary, and we'll get back to Harold. Oh my God, it's like the switchboard is lit.
Oh my God. I feel bad. You guys are great. Well, we talked about
2024. So I was going to quickly go into 2024 and 2025, and I'm going to start with 2025, even though we only have like 13 or 14 days of data. Yes, we are in a La Nina, but the three organizations that do daily climate data and do uh, predictions for what the next few days are going to look like are making it clear that January 2025, despite being a La Nina year, might be the hottest January on record. So wrap that around your brain that we are, and even if we aren't the number one January, all right, so we're number two. But instead of being number two with a full blown El Nino, we'll be number two with a La Nina. And this would just, in any other year, be a head spinning event. But now, I think it's like business as usual. Oh, geez, I haven't been able to keep up.
That's not good news. Jim is next, I think.
Jim.
Hi, I just had a quick comment or question for anyone. Back to the subject of pesticides. I'm wondering in traditional Latin America milpas, is there less of a need for chemical pesticides?
Who are you asking that, Jim? That question? I mean,
Oh, yeah, anyone. But
okay.
if
I would say in general,
if
yes, it seems
if
like there would be, because I remember the article that Julian wrote about it. Definitely, because there's that plant biodiversity there that's helping the soil and helping with the insects as well. But if anybody else would like to add, that's just the little that I know about it.
yeah, that would be my my guess as well. Thanks.
I'm surprised that you must know about Rachel Carson and what she wrote back in '69 about the chemicals associated and what the problems may occur. That's all I've got to say. I'm trying to cook a soup, but I'll get back to you. Hello, loves.
Thank you, Mary. We were discussing Rachel a little bit, so thank you for that.
It reminds me of, I think it was Harlan Ellison said it like 50 years ago, that humankind is a lot like Diplodocus. If you kick us in the ass, it takes years for the message to reach our brains. Um,
I think it's Puppy,
Puppy
then
Harold?
Harold.
Puppy!
Hey, good morning. At least it's morning for me here in the Pacific Northwest. Where we cut slugs with scissors, we drown them in beer, we toss them. I know it's very cruel, but it's them or us. Anyway, this is slug capital of the world, and I heard something about goldenrod, and I have to know more. I feel like it's
I
the
think what
elusive, mythic slug, solution of which there are many, baking soda, this, that. But I've literally been out in the garden with a headlamp on, you know, trying to deal with the little suckers. And because I don't use poisons. I've tried putting down, diatomaceous earth or whatever, because they crawl over it, but that didn't last. Anyway, And integrated pest management is a thing, and it's interesting to think about to what extent has it been incorporated in agriculture. I know when my daughter, who got a PhD in plant physiology from Cal, was doing a postdoc at Oregon State University, one of the so-called land grant, agricultural universities. They were researching trying to have some kind of bacteria or some kind of thing that could go on golf courses that could, it reminds me of when I would like buy aphids to release in my garden, and that's awesome, except once they eat all the things, then they split. So, but anyway, I know there's been a lot of research in this area, and it's great. And I retired from 40-year career doing workers' compensation, and occupationally related problems that I can remember hearing I had. My client was a farm worker and lived in farm worker housing. They also had a complaint against them for failing to label all the pesticides and herbicides they used. Literally, the farmer came to the hearing to defend himself. He was on oxygen, and he was an elderly man, and he was petrochemicals was how he did his fruit farming in Columbia Gorge, and he literally was up there. There's no problem with chemicals. I mean, the judge, you didn't even have to say anything. It was an acute exposure, but it just was horrible to me to think of. They would come through whether it was aerial spreading or by tractors, and just spray this shit. And farm worker housing was right there in the orchard, so children are being exposed. They're playing in the dirt with. Ugh. So I know we have a lot to do. And then I don't live that far from Yakima Valley, which is one of the huge up in Washington, apple producers, and have traditionally used some of the worst shit on apples. And I mean, every farm worker family up there is riddled with cancer, just fucking riddled with it. So if I can get rid of my slugs with doing something with goldenrod, please educate me. And thanks for being here. And yeah, not looking great. 2025. Let me finally tell you, I'm so proud of all my COVID activists down in LA. They've been passing out respirators, building Corsi Rosenthal boxes, clean air kits. Joaquin Beltran's down there. They're all just amazing. They were ahead of government in protecting people from these particulates of the smoke. And I'm just really proud of them. That's frontline work. And so thank you. And how are those birds doing?
I was going to do one quickie because we mentioned something earlier about Canada. I'm going to do this very fast. There's parts of um, Quebec and Ontario just north of the Great Lakes where at the right time of day in May and June, you can be hit with hundreds upon thousands of warblers doing something that's called a morning flight. The warblers are migrating that time of year north, but every once in a while they stop and they regroup. And so they might actually go south for an hour or two. And there's videos out there of these guys in Quebec who it was like they were in a shooting gallery and the birds are flying past them at warp 9 and they're ducking to avoid being hit by warblers. They counted something like 700,000 warblers in one space in 1 hour. And that is, for a bird lover, that's like, the ultimate life goal is to see that.
I
All right,
saw
this
it.
hand is.
Alfred Hitchcock made that movie.
For those of you who
Birds,
aren't really
right?
seriously
Birds.
into birds, there are the North American wood warblers are possibly the most beautiful birds in this part of the world. They are tiny little guys, uh, 8 to 20 grams. They overwinter typically in the South and in Latin America and Caribbean. But in about 8 to 10 weeks, they're going to start moving north. And most people who are real birders in this part of the world are birders to see these little tiny birds, these spectacle jewels, and you only see them for a few days of the year. And if you're lucky, you get to see them because it's getting worse. So this is why. it's almost like the whole purpose of this in North America of being a birder is to see either the waterfowl or in this time of year the owls, or in spring the warblers and the vireos moving north. Who's the next set of hands? I'm sorry, I haven't. Again, is Mary's hand? Is it
I,
Harold?
Harold and then Mary.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I was going to talk about two things, but now I'm going to talk about three things, Saul, because you brought up birds. Um, I used to live in Ontario, close to Point Pelee, which is
Oh,
the area where that migration happens. And what the warblers do is they go across a chain of islands through Lake Ontario, or sorry, Lake Erie, and yeah, they wait for the optimum time to make their final transit. And if you go at the right time in the morning, right down, you'll see them landing at the point on Point Pelee, and that's a national park, by the way. Beautiful. And they basically line up in the trees, recovering from the transit. So I've been standing in front of a shrub that has literally had 150 warblers, all different kinds. And the prothonotary, is that the name of it? I can't remember the name of that. The yellow
that
warbler.
would be just about the northernmost point where you would see breeding for
Yeah,
thonotores,
yeah, that's the only
and they
thing
will
sitting.
blow your eyeballs out of their sockets.
Yeah, we got lots of photos of him staring into the water. But yeah, basically, and you can walk right up to them. They're so tired, they're so worn out. You can stand right there. You have to stay on a boardwalk. You can't step off. And there's guys with huge cameras. There's just millions of photographers there getting these pictures, but it really is something spectacular to witness. And I'm lucky enough to. And actually, I spotted a blue. What was it? A grosbeak. It was a rare occurrence. It's actually on the internet around the 2000s, and it wasn't supposed to be there, but I confirmed the spotting for the blue. For that blue bird, and it made a lot of my friends jealous. Anyways, that was good. But I want to talk about two things. First, I shared talking about gardening and stuff, and toads and goldenrod. I'm building a frog sauna, and this was research done by a scientist, and they were trying to find, with the population collapse of frogs, they found that there's a fungus that sort of hurts them if they don't if they can't overwinter um, safely. And what they did is they built these saunas, and it heats it up, and all the frogs go in the sauna over the winter, and it's too hot for the fungus to survive. So they found like this huge increase in survivability. And again, it shows that they have been looking for chemicals or some sort of solution, and anyways, it's just a simple design. I'm going to be building one this year. My ground cover is about 4 to 5 feet tall. So um, I know someone was talking about slugs. You gotta. I have toad. I built a whole bunch of toad houses, and they eat the slugs. They love them. Um, but to get into that slug detail, what I do is I pick the goldenrod, and then I bruise it and break it and throw it in between the seedlings, and that attracts the slugs before they go for the seedlings. But I also around the perimeter of my garden, say 10 or 15 feet away, I make wine, and the part that you throw away, all of the casings and wine skins, that alcohol attracts them. So I bait them away from my garden, number one, and and the frogs just eat the slugs around the traps. But that, even if you're like pulling weeds out of your garden, I know some people pull the weeds and then throw that weed onto their compost pile. if you just bruise it up and throw it right in and keep it on the surface of your garden, again, that injured plant sends out a scent, and the slugs will go for it first and fill themselves on it before they'll go for your seedlings. And yeah, I've been up many, going out at night with a knife, cutting slugs. I've been there, I've done that, but not anymore. I don't. I think I cracked the code. But I wanted to finish with my most important thought, and I'll leave it at that. Is that talking about pesticides and pollution and on how they're unhealthy for us. One of the greater risks in the food supply chain is plastic and microplastic, the ingesting thereof, and they're finding high levels of microplastic in our bodies right now. And food processing, some of the coatings and chemicals that they use, they're ending up inside of us. And I think that's a greater threat to our health, especially in utero, um, fetal development. There's a whole bunch of research going into, how this is impacting the development of not just human fetuses, but all fetuses and all animals. So, we need to focus on all regulations and pollution. And right now, it's very concerning. The amount of microplastic that we do have in our bodies, but also the amount of research that has been done is very limited. And what they're finding out right now is that it's really bad. It's really bad for us, especially, young children and mental health. They're really concerned that some of these plastics are leaching endocrine disruptors. I'll try to put a link up in the nest of the science podcast I listen to, and it talks about some of the preliminary research and risks that we're looking at, and we need regulatory bodies and corporations to address this quickly. And this impacts everyone. Nobody is immune from this, and it really is something that I know that organic food is healthy and organic food is good for us. But if we process that organic food and plastic gets inside of it, it really kind of defeats the purpose of growing that quality food. So I'll throw that up in the nest for you, Saul. It's a great podcast. It goes through and it's fully cited with research about the risks of microplastic on our bodies. And I'll leave it at that.
I'm sorry. I've been holding my tongue for like the last 4 minutes, dying to make a joke about you and the frog sauna, because isn't that the meme for climate change? Yeah, that we're
Yeah,
all frogs in the pot,
yeah,
and the temperature is
yeah.
warming up.
That's it.
We're all in the frog sauna, Saul. Got to watch out.
By the way, Dr. Jane,
It's
Dr. Jane is very good with Rachel Donald on plastics. She did a climate critical thing on it, and it's quite a long one, about an hour and a half. Very impressive indeed. It's Dr. Jane with Rachel Donald. Recommended, highly recommended, actually. She did that about 3 months ago.
But we typically wrap by now. I think I can do another like 10 minutes, and that's about it. I imagine Kim is probably on her battery dead and her energy flagging. But let's go another 10 and then call it. So I don't even have my phone. Phone, where'd you go? Here's my phone.
I agree with you, Sal, and I think I'm at like 10% right now. I think Mary is up next, and Harold and everyone else, Puppy and Ed and Neil that was here before, and of course Oliver. Thank you for all your input and your comments. It's been such a interesting conversation, and I'm learning so much, and it's just great to have people who care about so many of these issues to come into a space and talk to one another about it. So thank you all for that.
Yeah, please. Mary.
Hello, strangers. Sorry I've been away, and I'm not coming on a regular basis, but yeah, you are lovely. Um, slugs. In Britain, what we do with slugs is we plant a jar in the ground and then we let them get drunk. They die happily, and then the problem doesn't exist. Sorry, just had to put that out there. Whether you agree or not, that's what used to be done. Years ago, I still advocate it as a way of getting rid of slugs. So obviously the other things, and we are talking ecology here, and I'm serious about the ecology. We do have hedgehogs. We have a lot of animals that will scrap up slugs and snails and things like that. As long as they are given the opportunity to venture through our gardens without being poisoned by chemicals and insecticides and all that sort of stuff. So we'll move on to
Um,
chemical. Sorry?
oh, sorry, Barry. I just wanted to say that I was thinking along those lines myself because I notice in the springtime that my grass gets, eaten up, and someone's been digging away, and I figured out it must be slugs, and I think it's like possums or skunks that are doing it. But I was also thinking, well, they're kind of doing me a service because they're aerating my lawn, and I know a lot of people pay for that service. So,
Yes,
I,
Kim, and I totally agree. I'm not going to go into all of it, but I stripped my garden back a few years ago, and I lost my hedgehogs from the garden basically because they didn't have any cover to walk through. 5 years on, I still haven't got my hedgehogs back, but the grass is growing, and hopefully they will return. So, chemicals, insecticides, all of this stuff, which also, as far as I'm concerned, um, is relevant to the discussions on plastics and microplastics. Forgive me just a second, I will talk to you, but I'm talking to you, and those that know me also know as soon as I start talking on the phone, the dog wants to go out for a troll around.
Well,
Bless her
well,
cotton socks every time. Never mind, we can ignore that. Chemicals, insecticides, plastics are a subdivision of the oil industry, and I'm not going to go into that because I truly do not think, however hard we might wish for it to happen, we can exclude oil, gas, and all that sort of stuff. So I'm not going to go there. But there are things that we can do in terms of how we approach our own lives as individuals and help protect the environment by doing our own bit. That includes, excuse me, I'm still walking. I need to give the dog
so am
now
I.
a bicky. for behaving itself and coming back in. Come on. Right. So, in amongst the serious stuff, and by God, I can be serious on this subject.
Hey, I'm the guy posting cat photos.
Sorry?
I'm the guy posting cat photos, so yeah, we can all have a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
I'm building a
Oh
hedgerow
God,
for my hedgehogs.
we really need to lighten up a bit, I must admit. You know, Oliver will know exactly what I'm talking about, and I really do hate the politics, but I still get dragged into them. But yeah, let's get back to it. Let's get back to the basics. Chemicals, insecticides, plastics, and also in terms for really bad, birds. They and animals, and forgive me, I might insult a few people, we are all animals. We all have a basic desire to live. And yes, you know, we do certain things that others don't agree with in terms of killing animals to feed ourselves and all that sort of stuff. But from an ecology perspective, it's a circle. Everything interacts with everything else. So if we take the slugs, the birds would eat them if they're not poisoned by chemicals or anything like that. The birds then eat other grubs and bits and pieces, and they give us something more, don't they? Birds, animals in life. They give a charm within their how do you put it? They provide a joy. When you can watch a bird, you can watch an animal, you can watch anything. I think the environment is becoming more and more important than ever before, and we seem to have been losing and drifting away from all aspects of the environment for quite a long time now, which I find very sad.
I think we're getting back. I hope we're getting back. I can't say that for guarantee. Unfortunately, we're also having step backs. The recent elections, literally across the board, are showing more of an impetus toward uh, personal survival than group survival.
I'm lucky, I suppose. I am dealing frequently these days with others, but how do I put this without sounding I don't want to sound condescending, and I really don't want to get into the politics of all of this, but there are people. I suppose one of my posts earlier today, my daughter is now 40 this year. I taught her how to cook. Now, that means it may seem really simple and something a mum does. But in the 40 years since she was born, there is a large gap within the youth in Britain, and I'm not going to just say Britain. I'm going to say a lot of countries. You know, we can go where we want with it. but definitely the Western countries, where actually we have become very, very reliant upon manufactured and instant foods. And I don't think it's doing any of us any good if you eat them. Not from the ability to be able to cook. If things get bad and you can't, I mean, you know, if you can't feed yourself because you're reliant upon a microwave, you are going to struggle if there's no electricity. So there is a mindset. There are 100 arguments. We can't change possibly all of our attitudes towards modernized life. And yeah, I'm 70 plus. But I still believe that I am progressive. I don't see myself as negative in the fact of moving forward. It's just how we move forward, really. Sorry, I broke across
I'm
you.
sorry, but no, I am in my car. I'm about to start it. I have to pick up my wife. So, and it's a nice excuse. Of all the excuses you could possibly have to end a conversation, having to help someone else out is probably like the best excuse. And,
Carry on. We're not going to stop you. I don't think we can.
well, okay. Here's what I can do. And if I find my phone, I can set myself on mute, and you can carry on without me. But I cannot do this forever.
I personally would prefer you not to be distracted. I would prefer you to get to your wife safely and get back home. If I'm honest, that's me being me.
Former agent. Absolutely,
Yeah,
Sal.
Sal,
I think
chuck
it's
us out.
time
Yeah,
to say goodbye.
Yeah.
It says my mic is on, but I can't hear anything.
The dog agrees, really. The dog agrees. She's barking now.
Sal, you can take us out. Thank you very much, Sal.
I don't know if I'm still on.
There's a growler on.
But I have to
You're
leave the
very much
conversation.
on, and so is the dog.
You guys can continue without me. Like I said,
Check
I'm in
us
the
out.
car and I can't hear anything.
Chuck us out.
So I'm not going to kill the space until later.
we can't go.
Oliver,
we have to stay.
What is this guy up to?
We have to stay.
We do have different perspectives.
What?
We do. No, I wasn't thinking personally. I was thinking generally between the US and the UK, really.
I'm not sure we do anymore. Seems to be the same to me now.
Oh, that's interesting. Possibly not. You're possibly right.
I feel more connection with America these days, if anything.
Yeah.
So
I think we need somebody. I don't know if there's any other UK citizens actually in on this meeting, but as I say, I really do not need or wish to get drawn into the politics of this country at the moment. But yes, God bless America.
yeah.
Thank God it's there.
All will change in 2 days. 3 days.
Yeah. Yes.
I guess you're right.
In my absence, I've been doing a hell of a lot of reviewing, reading, responding on X. It's actually quite exhausting at a time. and there we go. You know, either you believe in something and you go for it, or you don't. And I believe in this, and I believe in spaces, and I believe in America, and maybe I'll get arrested next week. I don't
Doubt it.
know.
Not in the UK.
Well, I keep my numbers. I keep my numbers small, Oliver.
Should be fine in the UK.
They've not quite.
It's fine.
They've not quite worked that
It's
out.
very quiet in the UK. Nothing seems to happen here.
You think so?
Yeah, nothing ever happens here. And one political party comes in and screws everything up. Then another political party comes in and tries to be responsible and gets blamed for it. So no, it's like nothing much happens. America, oh my God.
There is absolutely. You're dragging me into the politics, Oliver. I knew you would. There is absolutely no excuse for what has gone on in this country, irrelevant of parties, that has gone on, and excuse my dog, for what has happened in this country.
No.
And I am going to say it, and I know there will be people out there, maybe on this site as well, that will disagree with Elon Musk's involvement. But by God, we needed somebody to actually give everybody a bit of a poke beyond possibly what's necessary, but to shake them up and say no. We don't use the word no enough in this country, but I have reached the no, this is enough in this country. And, you know, I really can't walk away from it. I'm appalled by what's gone on. And I've said this openly, I'm not saying it just to you folks. I have said this openly. And that's why, to some extent, I have not been engaging with with this. And it's the only reason I'm engaging with this is with this space is it happened that I just saw it and I thought, no, I need a break. I've been at it all day. I've got a bug. You know, serious stuff, Kim. I've got a bug.
Oh dear. Sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been having that.
I haven't dashed off to the doctors. I decided that some garlic and a runny nose does not justify pressuring doctors into, I need help.
I think you'll be all right. Yeah.
I think I'll be all right. The dog might not if she doesn't stop pestering me.
She wants a wee,
what are
I
you
think.
doing?
She wants a wee.
No, she's been out. That was the first joint, first port of call in annoying me. No, now she's just snuffling around, really, and that's all I can say.
Anyway, we are stuck here talking about mundane things in the UK, and you in America, they've got burnt out cities.
I think I'll be honest. I think mundane. I would argue with, but yes, I understand.
They are mundane. They are. It's just clearing up the mess time, isn't it? Here, and trying to find the.
I finally got my phone to work, and I'm in the car driving. So yeah, look, if you guys are comfortable, keep talking. If it's over, it's over. Don't worry about it.
You are being so negative. We're fine.
Well, I'm gonna have to turn it off because I'm about to hit the highway and I need my concentration.
You should cut us.
Or at least I don't know. I'm gonna keep.
You should cut us
I will
off.
keep the phone on.
Okay, but you should cut us off.
But I will turn my voice off.
See what everybody else thinks. I'm happy to.
I'm in the process of cooking a massive pot of mainly organic, but also not organic veg into a huge soup. But then You know, bless us. You know, we women, we are ambidextrous and we are multitasking. Don't say a word. Don't be misogynistic. It's or you can. Or you can. You can be totally misogynistic if you want to. Will I pay attention? Absolutely not. I respect people's views and their opinions. And sometimes you just go with the flow. I've got a ticking noise.
Yeah, that's me. Sorry,
It might be.
I'm typing. I'm just trying to while listening. I'm trying to type up the. Well, I've got to go to work tomorrow morning. It's all quite hectic at the moment. I was up at church today, very early in the morning, far too early for me, about 7:30 in the morning, and talking to scaffolders. And tomorrow I've got to go up to Highgate and do a load of work up there. And the stone's been delayed because of the snow in the Yorkshire, so on and so on. All boring stuff, but
You just keep our churches built,
yes.
please, Oliver.
Oh, this one, out of interest, you might be interested in. It's one of the Scots. It's not Gilbert Scott. It's not Giles Scott. It's Aidan Scott, who is another one. They're all Catholics, but they're not all Catholic churches. And this is Aidan Scott's, one of his. It looks like a power station. It's massive and it's pulling apart, which is very interesting. It's actually, yes, it's not collapsing or anything like that, but it's pulling apart, and so I've got to stitch it all up again, basically. Do some sort of minor surgery on it.
Minor?
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like minor to
No,
me.
it's only stitching. It's nothing much. But it's a curious one, yeah.
Wouldn't minor surgery be more ironworking?
Yes, it would. Well, it is. That's exactly, yeah, minor, yeah. Yes.
I'm not sure that you can stitch granite
You
or
can, yes.
hard
No,
stone church together.
these are bricks. These are bricks, and you can absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah,
bricks.
it's not. This is not. This is not. It's got stone elements on it, big ones at the top and the bottom and elsewhere. But this is actually.
Grouting then.
Yes, but it's got to be stitched as well. You put in a kind of a type of rebar, which is stainless steel, on a special gunned-in mastic, and then you repoint it in the matching mortar that it's got now, which is basically lime and a kind of sort of shelly sand, pale sand. So yeah, you can stitch it. I've got to put in about 30 of these stitches in two different places over probably a 20, 25 courses of brickwork. And then hopefully it'll be all right. It'll stop moving. Yeah. It's only small stuff, but basically what it does is it creates a leak in the roof because the roof starts to pull apart, and the zinc covering of the roof then splits, and then the water gets in, and then they get the water pouring down the back wall over the altar. Very symbolic.
Sounds like my house. Come and see me.
Yeah, and then hopefully it'll work. You know, it's not the end of the world if it doesn't, but it'd be nice that it does work. It's a sort of standard solution, but it may require a roofer as well to go and have a look at it. I'll do a pro tem job on that.
The thing is, Oliver, some may also say this has got nothing to do with ecology. But I would say it does.
Not really, but a little bit. Not especially. There's a bit of stone involved.
No, not in its true form. But there is so much history that we still need to learn about. But yeah. I just love this stuff.
They're useful allies anyway. The Catholic Church are very useful allies. They've got 1.3 billion faithful around the world, so they're very useful allies in the climate and ecology. War, if you like. They would be very useful indeed if they were reactivated properly and really got on with it. But that takes the Pope himself to suddenly turn around and say, "You will do this now," not the kind of up till now it's been a bit wishy-washy. If he said, "You will you will be involved in this," then all the priests all across the world would all have to activate their parishes and all of their flock, and they'd all have to get involved, and suddenly you'd have a big turnout. I mean, that's like, what is it, about one-eighth of the world population? That'll do.
Well,
Yeah,
we are of the world,
but
so we are part of the
reactivate
ecology.
is the word.
Exactly.
We seem. I'm sorry, but I just want to pop this in. What Oliver has said about reactivating people, I think, is so important these days. I don't know what's happened to the world. I know there are certain players trying to change what we describe as what we want. And as I said, I'm not against not against improvements, technology, anything like that. But I think we need to take a bit of a step back and actually look, well, more than look, at what is happening to our world. And what I'm seeing, and I promise you, I don't just use X to establish my opinions or my views, is it is crazy. What we have is a crazy world that has been lost in so many respects.
Well, there's
And
8.1 billion of us, and we have to feed, clothe, and as material inequality increases, it puts pressure on people to behave in a more selfish manner.
I would agree with that.
So when you have essentially a dozen people owning half of everything, it puts pressure on the rest of us.
Yeah, unless those people on the lower level actually wake up to what has happened and actually say, no, this is a bottom up, not a top down situation, and we do not agree. I'm going to stop for a minute because the dog is trying again to join in. I'll give you a mo.
I've got an ambulance behind me. I've got trucks all around me.
You better release us. You better release us.
This is
What
the modern
have
world.
you done, really?
All right, guys. Yeah, let's cut this. I'm sorry, but
That's all right.
On behalf of Kim, thank you all for joining us.
Thanks.
And let's hope it'll be a little easier next time. Bye bye.